When one of the most famous men on the planet walked to his front window on a cold February morning and looked out at an empty driveway, something felt wrong. Not wrong like a delayed flight or a cancelled meeting. Wrong like a missing heartbeat. Wrong like a sound you have heard every single morning for 5 years that has suddenly, without warning, without explanation, gone completely silent. The black Escalade was not there. Marcus was not there. And Shaquille O'Neal, the man who had won 4 NBA championships, who had shattered backboards as a teenager, who had stood in front of 20,000 screaming fans without blinking, stood at that window and felt something he did not expect to feel. He felt afraid, not for himself, for someone else. Because here is the thing about Marcus Webb that the world never knew, that nobody knew. Because Marcus was exactly the kind of man who made sure nobody knew. He had driven for Shaq for 5 years. 5 years of 4 in the morning airport pickups. 5 years of long, quiet highway drives through the middle of Florida. 5 years of a cooler stocked with exactly the right Gatorade in exactly the right bottle. Red seedless grapes on the side. Gospel music turned low enough that it felt like a secret between the car and God. 5 years of showing up, every single morning, without one late arrival, without one complaint, without one single day where Marcus Jerome Webb was anything less than exactly who he said he was. And then one Tuesday, in February 2019, gone. No text, no call, no explanation. Just an empty driveway and a running engine going cold and silence, where a man used to be. Shaq called. Straight to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail again. He sent a text. Nothing. He had his assistant try. Nothing. And then, finally, his assistant reached the one emergency contact in Marcus's file. A young woman in Atlanta. His daughter. And what she said in that phone call. Quiet, careful. The specific calm of someone holding something enormous with both hands so it does not drop, stopped everyone in that office cold. She said, "He can't come in for a while." She said, "I'm sorry he didn't let Mr. O'Neal know." She said, "He just couldn't." 3 days went by. Shaq did his broadcasts. He took his meetings. He moved through the enormous machinery of his days. But every morning, he checked his phone for a message from Marcus. And every morning, there was nothing. On the 3rd day, Shaq did something that surprised everyone around him. He went alone. No assistant, no security, no camera. He got in a rented Ford Explorer and he drove to a modest apartment complex on West Conroy Road in Orlando. The kind of neighborhood built for people who work hard and ask for nothing extra. And he walked up to apartment 2C and he knocked on the door. And when that door opened, what Shaq saw on the other side changed him. Not because of what Marcus said, because of what was sitting on the coffee table. Medical papers, highlighted sections, a name of a disease that hits fast and hits hard and does not ask permission. And a photograph on the wall of a young woman in a graduation cap and gown, smiling like the whole sun had decided to take human form, who had spent 9 years working toward a dream that was now suddenly, terrifyingly, in danger of being taken away. And here is where everything gets complicated. Here is where the story stops being about a driver who didn't show up and becomes something else entirely. Something about loyalty and love and what people do for each other when no one is watching and nothing is required. Because what Shaq did next, in that small apartment, in that wooden kitchen chair, with a cooler and a phone and a piece of notebook paper he would not find until days later, is something that was never announced, never posted, never turned into a press release or a television moment or a story designed to make anyone look good. It just happened, between 2 men, in private, because it was right, and in the back seat of that black Escalade, sitting under a cold paper bag from a Panda Express on International Drive, there was a note, 4 words, written in careful cursive by a man who was falling apart, and still, somehow, found the grace to say them. 4 words that would make Shaquille O'Neal, the most decorated, most celebrated, most physically imposing man in the history of his sport, sit down on the front steps of his home and cry. We are not going to tell you those 4 words yet, because those 4 words only mean what they mean if you understand everything that came before them. The 5 years of early mornings. The daughter who decided at 14 what she wanted her life to be. The woman named Gloria who squeezed a hand in a hospital room and never knew a little girl was watching. The months in Atlanta. The bone marrow results. The handmade sign held up in a patch of Georgia sunshine. All of it builds to 4 words on a torn piece of notebook paper. And when you finally hear them, when you finally understand what they cost the man who wrote them and what they meant to the man who found them, you are going to feel it in a place that highlight reels and championship rings and platinum records cannot reach. Stay with us. Watch this whole story. Because what Shaquille O'Neal discovered in that driveway, in that apartment, in that back seat, is not just the heartbreaking reason his driver quit. It is the most important thing this story has to say. And it is coming. Before we talk about Shaquille O'Neal, we need to talk about Marcus. Because this story does not start inside a mansion. It does not start on a basketball court, or a concert stage, or under the bright lights of a television studio. It starts inside a 2009 Honda Accord with a clicking heater, parked outside a modest apartment complex on West Conroy Road in Orlando, Florida, on a gray winter morning when the world was about to change for 2 very different men. Marcus Jerome Webb was 51 years old. He was 5'8" on a good day, with reading glasses he kept in his breast pocket and salt and pepper hair he trimmed every other Saturday at Clyde's barbershop on Orange Blossom Trail, a place that smelled like shaving cream and old leather and had a television mounted in the corner that was always, without exception, tuned to ESPN. Marcus had been going there since 1998. He always sat in the second chair. He always tipped $4, which was the same tip he had left since the beginning, adjusted for nothing, because Marcus Jerome Webb was a man of deep and unshakable routine. He liked instant coffee, the kind you make with a kettle and a single-serve packet, stirred exactly 12 times. He liked gospel music on AM radio, turned low enough that it felt like something personal, not a performance. On evenings when his shift ended early, he would drive to the parking lot near Lake Tibet Butler on the western edge of Orlando, right where the water caught the last of the Florida sun and turned the color of hammered copper, and he would sit and watch until it was dark. He never told anyone he did this. It was just his. He drove a Honda Accord that made a small clicking sound when the heat was on. The rear left window had a scratch in it from a grocery cart in the Publix parking lot on South Kirkman Road. The back seat had a slight depression on the right side from years of passengers. The glove compartment held his registration, a pack of peppermint gum, a pocket Bible with a cracked spine, and whatever paperback he was currently reading, usually something by James Patterson, sometimes a John Grisham, occasionally a biography of someone who had built something from nothing. This was Marcus Webb. This was the whole of him, from the outside. But the inside of him, that was something different. Marcus had come to drive for Shaquille O'Neal in the spring of 2014, and the way it happened was not dramatic. There was no big interview, no lengthy audition, no connection made through someone powerful. A woman named Patricia Goodson, who handled staffing logistics for the O'Neal Group's Florida operations, had put out a quiet call through the network of professional drivers who had worked with the Orlando Magic organization over the years. She was looking for someone discreet, someone reliable, someone who could handle a high-profile principal without losing their head about it. Marcus had driven for the Magic for 12 years. 12 years of shuttling coaches and assistant coaches and trainers and front office staff and the occasional player through the highways and side streets and airport drop-off lanes of Orlando. 12 years of early mornings and late nights and holiday shifts. And not once, had Marcus Webb been late, created a problem, or said a single word to the press about anyone he had ever transported. He was, in the language of professional driving, what they called a ghost. Present when needed, invisible when not. Patricia called him on a Wednesday afternoon. He said yes before she finished explaining the job. He was never entirely sure why. The pay was good, but it was not so dramatically better than what he had been making that it explained the immediacy of his answer. Perhaps it was simpler than that. Perhaps it was just that Marcus Webb recognized something in the job description. Discretion required, reliability essential, no exceptions, that matched the exact shape of who he already was. He started the following Monday. The first time Marcus drove Shaquille O'Neal, it was a pickup from Orlando International Airport on a Tuesday evening in April 2014. Flight from Los Angeles, delayed 40 minutes. Marcus parked in the cell phone lot, turned the radio to gospel, low, and waited. When Shaq came through the automatic doors of the arrivals level, he was impossible to miss. Not just because of the size, all 7 feet and 325 pounds of him, but because of the way the air around him seemed to change. People turned. People slowed down. A child pointed. A woman touched her husband's arm and said something that made him spin around. Shaq moved through it all, with the ease of a man who had been famous since he was 19 years old and had long since made his peace with it. He spotted the small white card Marcus held, O'Neal, written in neat block letters, and walked over. He looked down at Marcus. Marcus looked up at Shaq. "You Marcus?" Shaq asked. "Yes, sir," Marcus said. "You gonna make me feel like a sardine in that thing?" Shaq asked, nodding toward the Escalade. "It's a big car," Marcus said. "You're a big man. Should be about even." Shaq looked at him for a second. Then he smiled. The real one, not the television one. "Okay," Shaq said. "Let's go." And that was the beginning. Over the months and then years that followed, Marcus learned Shaq the way a careful person learns anything important. Slowly, by observation, without assumption. He learned that Shaq liked Gatorade fruit punch on long drives. Not the squeeze bottles, the wide-mouth ones. He learned this by watching Shaq hold a squeeze bottle awkwardly one afternoon on the Florida Turnpike and not say anything about it, because Shaq was not a man who complained about small things. Marcus simply switched to wide mouth after that. He learned that Shaq liked red seedless grapes, not green, always red, and that he would eat them one at a time while scrolling through his phone with the other hand, a habit so consistent it became almost meditative to watch. He learned that Shaq was unexpectedly quiet in the car on certain mornings, not moody, not difficult or cold, just inward, thinking. Those were the mornings when Marcus turned the radio down another notch and drove steady and smooth, and Shaq would sometimes ride the entire length of the drive without speaking, staring out the window at the passing Florida landscape. And when they arrived, he would say, simply, "Good drive, Marcus," and that would be that. He learned that Shaq had what Marcus privately called a memory for people, a rare and remarkable ability to recall not just names, but the specific details of a person's life. He remembered that Marcus's daughter was in college. He remembered she was studying nursing. He would ask about her, not as small talk, but as genuine inquiry. "How's Destiny doing?" He said her name. Every time. That was not nothing. In Marcus's experience, powerful people did not always say the names of the people who served them. And Marcus learned one more thing, perhaps the most important. Shaquille O'Neal was profoundly, genuinely kind. Not in a showy way. Not in the way that required an audience. In the way that a man is kind when nobody is watching, which is the only way that truly counts. There was the afternoon in October 2016, when Marcus had a flat tire 30 minutes before a pickup. He called Shaq directly, heart hammering a little, hating to be the source of a problem. And before Marcus could finish the apology he had prepared, Shaq said, "Don't worry about it. You need a tow?" Marcus said he could handle it. Shaq said, "I'll have Brianna get me a car. You change that tire safe. We'll figure out the rest." And then he hung up. No irritation, no sighing, just handled. Or the morning in March 2018, when Marcus arrived at the Isleworth estate to find a bag on the front step with his name on it. Inside, a new James Patterson novel. The one Marcus had mentioned offhandedly was on his list, and a gift card to Barnes & Noble with a post-it note attached that said, in Shaq's large, slightly unruly handwriting, "For the next one, and the one after that." Marcus kept the post-it note. He tucked it into the cracked spine of his pocket Bible, between the pages of Psalms, where it stayed. These were the years. 5 years of mornings and evenings, of airports and long Florida highways, of silence and small kindnesses, and the quiet accumulation of a trust that neither man had formally named, but both of them felt. But through all of it, through every early pickup and every long wait and every nighttime airport run, there was one thing that ran beneath everything else in Marcus Webb's life, like a steady current beneath still water. Her name was Destiny Renee Webb, 23 years old, living in Atlanta, Georgia. Working toward her nursing degree at Georgia State University's Burdine F. Lewis College of Nursing and Health Professions on Kell Hall Drive in Atlanta, one of the most respected nursing programs in the South, with a clinical training network that placed students in hospitals throughout the city. Destiny had decided she wanted to be a nurse when she was 14 years old. She had decided it in a hospital room. Her mother, Claudette Marie Webb, had been diagnosed with breast cancer in 2005, when Destiny was 9. The illness moved slowly at first, and then, the way these things sometimes do, all at once. By 2007 it was everywhere, and Claudette spent the final 3 months of her life in a room at Florida Hospital, now Advent Health Orlando on Rollins Street in Winter Park, attended by a rotating team of nurses who came in and out of that room like angels working a long shift. Destiny watched them. She watched the way they spoke to her mother, not above her, not around her, but directly to her. She watched them adjust the pillow and check the IV and explain every procedure in plain, clear language that took the fear out of it a little. She watched them sit sometimes, briefly, at the edge of the bed, and just be present in a way that had no medical function except the most important one. It said, "You are not alone in here." One nurse in particular, a woman named Gloria, 50-ish, with natural hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain, had a habit of squeezing Claudette's hand each time she left the room. Every time. Without fail. Just a squeeze. Like a small, repeated promise. 14-year-old Destiny saw that and knew. She knew what she was going to do with her life. She told her father on the drive home from the hospital the evening her mother passed, sitting in the front seat of the old Accord, the orange groves dark outside the window, her face very still in the way grief makes young faces still. "I'm going to be a nurse, Daddy," she said. Like Gloria. Marcus had driven in silence for a moment. Then, he had put his hand over hers on the center console. "I know you are," he said. "I know." He had believed it from the first moment she said it. He believed it every day after. He believed it on every morning drive to the airport, and every evening pickup from the Orlando Executive Airport, and every quiet stretch of the Florida Turnpike, when he stared at the road ahead and let the belief in destiny hold him up the way beliefs can, when they are strong enough. She was, in every way that mattered, what Marcus Jerome Webb had built his life around. She was his whole reason. Which is why, on the night of February 11th, 2019, a Monday, ordinary in every way until it suddenly wasn't, when Marcus's phone rang at 9:14 in the evening, and the screen read, "Destiny Atlanta," and he answered with the easy warmth of a man expecting good news, and instead heard the sound of his daughter trying to be calm about something that was the opposite of calm. Everything stopped. He was standing in his kitchen on West Conroy Road, kettle on the stove, the gospel station playing low, a half-eaten bowl of leftover rice on the counter. He was wearing his gray sweatshirt and his dark sweatpants, and his reading glasses were on top of his head. He listened to what destiny told him. He did not speak for a very long time. When he finally did, his voice was steady. The voice of a man who had learned, in a hospital room in 2007, that the people you love sometimes need you to be steady, even when you are not. "Okay, baby," he said. "Okay, I'm here." After he hung up, he stood very still in the kitchen for several minutes. The kettle began to whistle. He did not move to take it off the heat. He stood, and he stared at the wall where Destiny's graduation photo hung in its frame. The one of her in the cap and gown, smiling like the sun. And the kettle screamed, and the gospel station played, and Marcus Webb stood in the middle of his quiet life and felt something give way inside him. He packed a bag that night. The next morning, February 12, 2019, he drove to the Panda Express on International Drive, because somehow, in the foggy geography of grief and shock, his body knew before his mind did that he needed to do something normal, something with shape and purpose. He ordered 2 containers of orange chicken. He drove to the Isleworth estate. He parked the Escalade in the driveway where it was supposed to be, and then he sat there. He sat for 20 minutes, maybe more, with the engine running and the 2 containers of orange chicken on the passenger seat going slowly cold. He picked up his phone to call Shaq. He put it back down. He picked it up again. He thought about what he would say. He thought about how the words felt too big and too private and too much. He thought about how a man like Shaq had the weight of the whole world on his plate, and Marcus's job was to make things easier, not heavier. He thought about destiny. He reached into the glove compartment and found a piece of notebook paper, torn from the small yellow legal pad he kept for mileage notes, and a pen. He wrote 4 words. He looked at them. He folded the paper and put it under the Panda Express bag on the back seat, where Shaq would eventually find it. He turned off the engine. He left the keys in the cup holder. He got out of the Escalade, walked to his old Honda Accord parked at the curb, and drove away. He did not look back. He did not call. He did not text. The Escalade sat in the driveway of the Isleworth estate, engine cooling, orange chicken going cold, a folded piece of notebook paper lying on the back seat that no one would read until days later. On the paper, 4 words. You already know what they say. But you do not yet know, not fully, not yet, what they cost Marcus Webb to write, and what they would eventually mean to the man who found them. That part of the story is still coming. Shaquille O'Neal woke up at 6:47 in the morning on February 12, 2019. This was unusual. Shaq was not, by nature or by habit, an early riser. His career, the concerts, the television broadcasts, the business meetings that stretched into evenings, the endless machinery of being Shaquille O'Neal, had rewired his internal clock years ago into something that preferred midnight over midnight and noon over dawn. But on this particular Tuesday morning, something pulled him up before his alarm, the way unease sometimes does. A low hum of something not right, felt before it is understood. He lay in bed for a moment inside his Isleworth estate, a sprawling property set along the Butler chain of lakes, in the private gated community of Isleworth, Windermere, Florida, where the houses sit behind iron gates and the lawns run down to the water like green carpets unrolled by money. It was the kind of neighborhood where professional athletes and business executives lived behind tall hedges, and the neighbors were the sort of people who respected privacy because they required it themselves. Tiger Woods had lived nearby for years. So had other names you would recognize. The community was, above all things, quiet. Exceptionally, purposefully quiet. Shaq's house was not small inside. It had a home theater, and a recording setup, and a basketball half-court, and a garage that held more vehicles than most people's apartment complexes. It had rooms for guests, and rooms for staff, and rooms that existed, seemingly, just to be rooms. It was a house that reflected the full, accumulated, remarkable fact of what Shaquille O'Neal had built from a childhood spent moving between military bases with his stepfather, Philip Harrison, who had raised him with strictness and love in equal essential measure. But on this particular morning, in this particular house, what Shaq noticed was not what was there. It was what wasn't. By 7:30, Marcus should have been in the driveway. Shaq had a TNT inside the NBA production meeting in Atlanta, a planning session for the second half of the NBA season, held at Turner Studios on Techwood Drive, the same complex where the show was filmed. His flight out of Orlando International Airport was scheduled for 10:15 a.m., which meant he needed to leave the house no later than 8:45 to give himself comfortable time. Marcus knew this. Marcus always knew this. Marcus was the kind of man who, if you needed to leave by 8:45, would be in the driveway at 8:15, engine running, cooler stocked, radio already on. At 7:30, the driveway was empty. Shaq checked his phone. No messages. He called Marcus's number. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. The plain, automatic kind that just says the number back to you, because Marcus had never bothered recording a personal greeting. Shaq hung up and called again. Voicemail again. He sent a text. "Marcus, you good, bro?" He set the phone down and went to make coffee. Not the instant kind, but the dark roast he kept in a canister on the counter, and stood at the kitchen window looking at the driveway the way you look at something you expect to change at any moment. The driveway did not change. It stayed empty. The morning light over the lake behind the house was gray and soft and flat, the kind of February light that doesn't commit to anything. His phone stayed quiet. He called his assistant, Brianna Holloway, at 7:43. Brianna was 29, sharp, and had the particular skill of sounding completely unruffled at any hour about any situation, a quality that made her exceptionally good at her job and occasionally made Shaq suspect she was not entirely human. She answered on the second ring, which was 2 rings fewer than most people needed. Marcus didn't show, Shaq said, not answering his phone. A brief pause, not hesitation, just the sound of Brianna's brain already moving. "Okay, I'll find you a backup driver and try to reach him on my end. What time do you need to leave?" 8:45 at the latest. "You'll have someone by 8:15, she said. "I'll handle Marcus." She handled it. She always handled it. By 8:12, a young man named Terrell Fontaine was in the driveway in a black Escalade. Clean record, professional driving certification, good reviews from 2 prior clients in the Orlando area. Terrell was 28, quiet, correctly dressed, and had the slightly over-attentive manner of someone who knows he is a last-minute substitute and wants to make a good impression. Shaq appreciated the effort without particularly noticing it. He got in the back seat. The cooler was there. Brianna had thought of it. But it had water bottles in it, not Gatorade fruit punch. Nobody had told Terrell. Nobody had known to tell him. That was the kind of knowledge that lived only inside Marcus Webb, built over 5 years of quiet observation, and it was not the sort of thing you could transfer with a phone call. Shaq didn't say anything about the water bottles. He picked up his phone instead and stared at the screen for a long time as Terrell pulled out of the driveway and onto the road toward the Florida Turnpike. The screen was blank. Nothing from Marcus. He typed the text again, different words this time. "Hey, serious question. Everything okay? Not like you." He watched the screen for another minute. Then he put the phone face down on the seat beside him and looked out the window. The orange groves moved past on either side of the highway. A water tower appeared on the horizon and then slid away behind them. The Florida morning opened up wide and pale, and the road ran straight ahead the way Florida roads do, flat as a sentence without punctuation. Shaq was quiet the whole way to the airport. Terrell, to his credit, understood this and said nothing. Brianna tried Marcus's number 4 times between 8 and 10 in the morning. Same result each time. 4 rings, voicemail, the robotic recitation of the digits. She tried text messages. She ran a check through the staffing file Marcus had submitted when he was brought on through the O'Neill Group's private hiring channel. A tidy 3-page document he had filled out in careful block print. Every field completed, nothing left blank. The emergency contact was listed at the bottom. Destiny Webb, daughter, Atlanta, GA, and a cell phone number with a 404 area code. Brianna looked at the contact for a moment. Calling a driver's family felt like crossing a line. It had the weight of an intrusion, of taking something small and making it large before you knew whether it needed to be large. But Marcus had been unreachable for 3 hours now, and Shaq had asked her to find out what she could, and Brianna Holloway did not leave things half done. She called the number. It rang twice. The voice that answered was young and female and calm in a very deliberate way, the kind of calm that has effort behind it. "Hello?" "Hi," Brianna said carefully. "I'm calling from Shaquille O'Neal's office. I'm looking for Marcus Webb. We weren't able to reach him this morning, and I just wanted to make sure everything was okay." A brief silence. Not surprise exactly, more like the sound of someone who had been expecting a call without knowing when it would come. "I know why you're calling," Destiny said. "My dad isn't going to be able to come in for a while. I'm sorry he didn't let Mr. O'Neill know. He just..." A pause. Just a fraction of a second, but enough to carry something in it. "He couldn't." Brianna kept her voice even. "Is he okay?" The silence this time lasted 3 full seconds. Brianna counted them. "No," Destiny said. "He's not." She did not elaborate. She thanked Brianna in the polite, self-contained way of someone who has been raised to manage their own burdens, and she hung up. Brianna sat at her desk for a moment, with the phone still in her hand. Then she opened a new note on her laptop and wrote 2 words: "Family emergency." Then she called Shaq. He was at Turner Studios by then, in a conference room with a long table and a whiteboard and 4 or 5 production staff laying out the schedule for the remaining months of the NBA season. Ernie Johnson was there, steady and warm as always, the kind of man who makes every room feel a little more trustworthy just by being in it. Kenny Smith was across the table, a legal pad in front of him covered in notes. Someone from the scheduling department was at the whiteboard. Shaq's phone buzzed. He saw Brianna on the screen, excused himself, and stepped into the hallway. She told him what Destiny had said. All of it, which was not much, but the shape of it was enough. He couldn't. He's not okay. Family. Shaq stood in the hallway of Turner Studios with his phone against his ear, and the sound of the production meeting murmuring through the conference room door, and he said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "Find out where Marcus lives." Not loudly, not urgently, just clearly, in the voice of a man who has made a decision and does not need to explain it. "I'll send you the address from his file," Brianna said. "Do that," Shaq said. He went back into the conference room. He sat down. He participated in the meeting in the way that Shaquille O'Neal participates in things. Fully, loudly at moments, with the kind of presence that cannot be half deployed. He laughed when something was funny. He pushed back on a scheduling conflict he didn't like. He ate half a sandwich from the catering spread on the side table. But underneath all of it, quiet and insistent as a gospel station turned low, was one thought. Something is wrong with Marcus. Now here is the thing about Shaquille O'Neal that people misunderstand. The world sees the performance of him, and it is a genuinely extraordinary performance. Do not mistake that. The man who shattered backboards as a 19-year-old rookie with the Orlando Magic after being selected first overall in the 1992 NBA draft. The man who signed with the Los Angeles Lakers in 1996 and proceeded, alongside Kobe Bryant, and under the philosophical coaching architecture of Phil Jackson, to win 3 consecutive NBA championships from 2000 to 2002, earning Finals MVP all 3 times, and the regular season MVP in 2000, becoming one of the most dominant forces the sport had ever produced. The man who brought that same unstoppable presence to the Miami Heat and won a 4th championship ring alongside Dwayne Wade in 2006, a title that punctuated his legacy with the kind of exclamation point that leaves no argument open. The world sees DJ Diesel behind the turntables at Lollapalooza, the bass shaking the ground under 20,000 people. It sees the rap albums. He went platinum, which is not supposed to happen, and he did it anyway. It sees the movies, the commercials, the business empire, the restaurant franchises, the real estate, the tech investments, the personal brand that has generated hundreds of millions of dollars and shows no sign of slowing. It sees the Emmy-winning studio presence on TNT's Inside the NBA, the best desk in sports television, where he sits beside Ernie Johnson and Charles Barkley and Kenny Smith, and makes the entire country feel like they are watching 4 friends argue about basketball in the world's most entertaining living room. The world sees the size, 7 feet 1 inch, 325 pounds at his playing peak. A physical fact so extreme that it changed the rules of engagement for an entire professional sport. Coaches invented an entirely new fouling strategy, hack-a-Shaq, just to prevent him from doing what he did in the paint, which was to simply be, in any practical sense, unstoppable. The world sees all of this. What the world does not always see is what Marcus Webb had seen for 5 years from the front seat of a black Escalade, which is that Shaquille O'Neal, underneath the performance of himself, was a man of profound and consistent human decency. Not occasional decency, not public decency, the quiet, private, unglamorous kind. The kind that showed up in the way he asked about destiny by name every time. The kind that showed up in a Barnes & Noble gift card on a front step with a post-it note that said for the next one, and the one after that. The kind that showed up in October 2016 when a flat tire could have been a moment of frustration and became instead a moment of simple, uncomplicated grace. Don't worry about it. Change that tire safe. We'll figure out the rest. Marcus had watched all of it from the front seat, and he had understood something important. This was not a man performing kindness for an audience. There was no audience. There was only the space between 2 people in a car, and what Shaq chose to put into that space was always, reliably, something generous. This is why, when Marcus left the Escalade in the driveway on the morning of February 12th, the leaving cost him as much as it did. Because he was not just leaving a job, he was leaving the daily proximity of someone he trusted completely. And he left anyway, because destiny needed him more. 3 days passed. February 12th. February 13th. Valentine's Day, the 14th, came and went with its red storefronts and its grocery store roses. Shaq did his broadcast commitments. He took meetings. He answered emails and made calls, and moved through the enormous machinery of his days with the competence of a man who has long since learned to compartmentalize. But every morning he checked his phone for a message from Marcus. Every morning, there was nothing. Terrell Fontaine drove him those 3 days. Terrell was fine. Terrell was professional, and prompt, and entirely without fault. He had the right car, and he was always on time, and he didn't talk too much or too little. He was, by any objective measure, a perfectly good driver. He was not Marcus. And the not Marcusness of him was something Shaq felt every single time he got in the back seat. Not with irritation. He had no reason for irritation toward a young man who was doing his job correctly. But with the specific awareness of an absence, the way you feel a missing tooth with your tongue. Not because it hurts exactly, but because the shape of the space is wrong. The cooler had water bottles. The radio was off. Nobody had stocked red seedless grapes. On the evening of February 14th, Sitting in the back of the Escalade on the way back from a dinner meeting at the Capitol Grill on East Pine Street in downtown Orlando, Shaq made a decision. He texted Brianna, "You get that address?" She replied in under 30 seconds. "Sent it to you Tuesday, West Conroy Road, apartment 2C. He looked at the address on his screen. West Conroy Road. He knew the general area, the western edge of Orlando, working neighborhoods, apartment complexes with chain-link fences and wind chimes on the railings, the kind of streets that did not appear in the magazine features about Orlando's luxury zip codes. 23 minutes from Isleworth, depending on traffic. A different world. He typed back, "I'm going Friday morning. Do you want me to come?" Brianna wrote. He thought about this for a moment. "No," he wrote. "Just the address." Friday, February 15th, 2019, arrived cold by Orlando standards. 51 degrees at 7 in the morning, which in Florida registers as a genuine winter event. The palm trees along the roadways looked faintly surprised by it. People wore coats they only owned for theoretical reasons. Shaq asked Terrell to drive him. Not in the big Escalade, in something less announcing, a rented Ford Explorer that sat in the garage and was used for lower-key movements. He sat in the back and watched West Colonial Drive slide past the window, the gas stations, and the dollar stores, and the tire shops, and the small restaurants with hand-painted signs in English and Spanish. This part of Orlando was not behind a gate. It was not on a lake. It was the part of the city that kept the other parts running. The people who drove and cleaned and cooked and showed up, always showed up, without being asked twice. They turned onto West Conroy Road. "Pull up here," Shaq said. "I'll walk the last bit." Terrell pulled over. He was professional enough not to ask questions. Shaq got out of the Explorer. He stood on the sidewalk outside the apartment complex and looked at it for a moment. The two-story buildings, the wrought iron railings, a child's bicycle chained to a stair post, someone's potted plant on a second-floor landing, a string of wind chimes above a door that turned slowly in the morning cold. He found apartment 2C. He knocked. And now we are back to where Marcus was, standing in the doorway in his gray sweatshirt and dark sweatpants, not having slept, the tight jaw and the swollen eyes of a man who has been holding something too heavy for too many days alone. And now we arrive at what the chapter heading promised, the 5 years of quiet loyalty, laid out so that when Marcus opens that door and sees Shaquille O'Neal standing there, you understand what it means. You understand why Marcus's face does that complicated, painful thing. You understand why a man who is constitutionally composed, who was raised by a seamstress in Ocala, Florida, to serve quietly and complain never, who has driven through thunderstorms and 4-hour waits and early mornings that started before the sun had made up its mind. You understand why Marcus Jerome Webb, standing in his own doorway on a cold February morning, looked at the man he had driven for 5 years and could not hold it together for one more second. 5 years of quiet loyalty had led, without either of them planning it, to this. A closed door. A knock. A man on the other side who came anyway. What happened when the door opened is the next chapter. But understand this before you turn the page. Marcus did not cry because he was weak. He cried because he had been carrying something in complete silence, for days, entirely alone, and the sight of someone who had come to find him, not because it was convenient or easy or expected, but simply because they noticed he was gone, and that noticing meant something. That was the thing that broke the dam. Not grief. Not fear. Not the diagnosis that had shattered his world 6 days earlier. The thing that finally broke Marcus Webb open was the simplest, rarest, most underrated gift one human being can offer another. Someone had noticed. Someone had come. Shaq did not say anything clever when the door opened. He did not have a prepared speech. He had not rehearsed anything in the car on the way over, had not thought through the exact right words to use, had not consulted anyone or asked anyone's advice about how to handle this moment. He had simply gotten in a rented Ford Explorer on a cold Friday morning and come to West Conroy Road because Marcus was gone and something was wrong, and that was reason enough. When the door opened and he saw Marcus, the swollen eyes, the gray sweatshirt, the jaw clenched tight around everything he had been holding for 6 days, Shaq said one word: Marcus, just the name. In the voice a person uses when they mean, I see you, I am here, you do not have to explain yet. And Marcus Webb, who had driven through thunderstorms and 4 a.m. airport pickups and a 4-hour wait outside Universal Studios Orlando with a James Patterson novel and not one word of complaint. Marcus Webb, who had been raised by a seamstress mother in Ocala, Florida, to carry his own weight and never make himself a burden, came completely undone, not slowly, not gracefully. The way a man comes undone when he has been holding a wall up for 6 days, and the wall has finally had enough. His shoulders dropped first. Then his hand went to his face. Then the sound came. Not a sob exactly, more like the sound of something structural giving way, deep and involuntary, like a floorboard in an old house that has finally taken more weight than it was built for. Shaq stepped through the door. He did not ask permission. He did not wait to be invited. He moved into the apartment the way large, decent people move into spaces where someone is suffering, with quiet deliberateness, without making it a moment about themselves. He found the nearest chair, a wooden one pulled up beside a small dining table with a plastic tablecloth, and he sat down in it, and the chair accepted his weight with a faint creak of protest, and he settled and he waited. He was good at waiting. 5 years of early mornings had taught him that Marcus Webb understood the value of silence. It seemed only right to return the favor now. The apartment was small, not in a distressed way. It was clean and cared for, everything in its place with the orderliness of a man who has lived alone long enough to build a system. But it was small in the way that honest, working lives are often small, sized exactly to what was needed and nothing more. A couch the color of a faded bluebell, a coffee table with a ring stain in one corner, sealed over with a magazine, a small television on a pressed wood stand, a kitchen visible through a doorway, the kettle on the stove, a dish towel folded over the oven handle with military precision. On the coffee table, papers. Shaq saw them immediately. Anyone would have. They were not hidden or tucked away. They were simply there, the way paperwork sits when it has arrived too fast and too heavy to be properly filed. Printed pages from the American Cancer Society website, certain sections underlined in blue pen. Forms from Advent Health Orlando, on Rollins Street in Winter Park. Intake paperwork, referral paperwork, the administrative machinery of a medical situation that had only just begun grinding into motion. A printout from the Winship Cancer Institute at Emory University in Atlanta. He would look at this more closely in a moment and recognize the name, because Shaq had visited Emory in 2016 as part of his charitable work through the Shaquille O'Neal Foundation and knew the institution's reputation. And on the wall above the television, in a dark wood frame that had been hung with care and leveled precisely, destiny, cap and gown, graduation day, smiling the way young people smile when they have worked for something and finally hold it in their hands. The photograph was the brightest thing in the room, not because of the frame or the light, but because of the smile itself, which was the kind that does not know yet what is coming. Shaq looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then he looked at Marcus, who had folded himself onto the end of the blue couch and was pressing the heels of his hands into his eyes, the way people do when they are trying to physically push the tears back in. Shaq did not look away. He did not check his phone. He did not fill the air with reassurances or questions, or the kind of well-meaning noise that people generate when silence makes them uncomfortable. He sat in the wooden chair and he waited, and the waiting said everything that words at that moment could not. After a while, 3 minutes, maybe 4, though time does strange things in rooms like this. Marcus lowered his hands from his face. He looked at the medical papers on the coffee table. He did not look at Shaq. "She called me on February 11th, he said. His voice was rough at the edges. The voice of a man who has not been using it much, has been mostly silent for days, sitting with something too large for conversation. "Monday night," he continued. 9:14. I remember the time because I looked at the clock when the phone rang and I thought, it's late for her to call. She's a nursing student. She's usually in bed by 10. She's disciplined like that." A brief pause. "Like her mama was." He stopped on that word. Mama. Let it sit for a second, then moved on. She'd been to the doctor. She was tired. More than normal. Bruising easy. She thought it was stress from school, from the clinical hours. She's doing clinicals at Grady Memorial Hospital on Jesse Hill Jr. Drive in Atlanta. Long shifts, hard work. She thought she was just run down. He paused again. The doctor ran blood tests, then more blood tests. Then they sent her to a specialist. He finally looked up. His eyes were steady now, in the way eyes get steady when a person has made a decision to say a thing out loud, and the saying of it is the only way through. "Acute myeloid leukemia," Marcus said. "AML, that's what they're calling it. She's 23 years old and they're telling me it's aggressive, and it needs to be treated fast, and the treatment itself is..." He stopped. His jaw worked silently for a moment. "The treatment is going to be brutal. Chemotherapy. Multiple rounds. She'll have to stop school. She'll need someone with her, or she'll need to come home." The room was very quiet. Outside, distantly, someone's wind chimes turned in the morning cold. "I raised her alone," Marcus said. "Since she was 11. Since Claudette passed." His voice was matter-of-fact about this, in the way that old grief is matter-of-fact. It has been carried so long that it no longer requires special handling. "She is every good thing I ever did. She decided she wanted to be a nurse when she was 14, watched the nurses take care of her mama in that hospital room, and decided right then that was what she was going to do. She's never changed her mind, not once. In 9 years, she has not wavered one single time." He looked at the photograph on the wall. "And now she is 23 years old, and she is sick, and somebody needs to be with her. And I..." He stopped. He looked back at Shaq. "I couldn't drive anybody anywhere after that call," he said. "I tried. I drove to the Panda Express. I drove to your house. I sat in the driveway, and I picked up my phone to call you, and I couldn't make the words come out right. It felt too big, and too private, and too much to put on somebody who has their own world to carry." The last sentence landed in the room and stayed there. Shaq was quiet for a moment. Then, in a low and very direct voice, he asked, "Why didn't you call me?" Marcus shook his head slowly, not dismissively, more like a man acknowledging an argument he has already had with himself and lost. "I didn't want to bother you," he said. 5 words. "I didn't want to bother you." Shaq heard them and felt something shift in his chest. Not anger exactly, but something adjacent to it. The feeling you get when someone has miscalculated their own worth so completely that the calculation itself becomes a kind of wound. 5 years. 5 years of showing up before the sun did, of knowing about the grapes and the Gatorade and the wide-mouth bottles, of sitting in silence when silence was what was needed, of leaving a Barnes & Noble gift card on a doorstep without expecting anything back, of waiting 4 hours outside a theme park with a paperback novel and no complaint. And after all of that, Marcus Webb had looked at his daughter's diagnosis and decided it did not rise to the level of something worth troubling Shaquille O'Neal about. Shaq stood up. He was not a small man standing up. He was a very large man standing up in a very small room. And the room reorganized itself around the fact of him. The ceiling suddenly closer. The walls suddenly nearer. The whole apartment aware of the mass and presence that had just shifted from seated to standing. He crossed the room in 3 steps. He put one hand on Marcus's shoulder. One enormous hand. The hand that had dunked over 7-footers and shattered backboards, and been the instrument of 4 championship rings. Resting now on the shoulder of a 51-year-old man in a gray sweatshirt on a faded blue couch. "Okay," Shaq said. Just that word. But the word had weight. The word had intention behind it. "Okay," he said again. "Here's what's going to happen." He did not sit back down. He walked to the kitchen doorway instead. That easy, long-strided walk of a man who has never had to make himself smaller in any situation. And he looked at the counter. He saw the brown paper bag sitting there. The Panda Express logo on the side, red and familiar. Inside, visible through the folded top, 2 containers of orange chicken, completely cold, bought days ago on a morning when Marcus had tried to perform normalcy and found he could not sustain it past the parking lot of a fast food restaurant on International Drive. Shaq looked at the bag for a moment. He looked back at Marcus. "You ate today?" he asked. Marcus shook his head. Shaq nodded once. He turned back to the kitchen. He found the kettle, still on the stove from nights ago, empty now. He filled it at the sink and set it on the burner. He found a cabinet and opened it until he located 2 mugs. He found a shelf and found, predictably, a box of Folgers instant coffee, single-serve packets stacked neatly in a row. He found a spoon in the first drawer he opened, because Marcus Webb was an organized man, and the first drawer was exactly where the spoons would be. He made coffee, 2 cups. He stirred each one exactly 12 times, because he had, without ever being told, noticed over 5 years the particular way Marcus prepared his own coffee on the mornings when he brought a thermos. The deliberate, rotating stir, 12 turns, no more, no less. The unconscious ritual of a man who lived by routine. He brought both cups to the coffee table and sat back down. Marcus stared at his cup. "You counted," Marcus said. "Not a question, a recognition." 12, Shaq said simply. Marcus picked up the mug. He looked at it for a moment, the way people look at things when those things have just told them something important about how they have been seen. Then he drank. They sat together in the small apartment on West Conroy Road, with the wind chimes going outside, and the February cold pressing against the windows, and the photograph of Destiny on the wall above the television. And Shaq said nothing for a while. He let the coffee do what coffee does in hard moments, which is to give hands something to hold, and time something to fill. Then he said, "Tell me everything. The hospital, the doctor, the treatment plan, everything they told her, everything she told you, all of it." And Marcus told him. It took 40 minutes. Marcus talked and Shaq listened, with the focus of a man who has spent decades in rooms, locker rooms, boardrooms, television studios, where listening to exactly what is being said is the difference between understanding and missing the point entirely. He did not interrupt. He did not offer comfort that was premature, or reassurance that would have been dishonest. He simply absorbed the information with the same methodical attention he had once applied to studying opposing centers before big games. All of it, every detail, nothing waved past. What he learned, Destiny's diagnosis, was acute myeloid leukemia, which is a cancer of the blood and bone marrow. It is one of the more aggressive forms of blood cancer in existence, fast-moving, requiring fast response. The standard treatment involved intensive chemotherapy in cycles, the first phase known as induction therapy, designed to push the disease into remission. The process was long and physically brutal. Hair loss, extreme fatigue, vulnerability to infection, nausea that made eating nearly impossible on bad days. Patients undergoing induction therapy were typically hospitalized for 4 to 6 weeks at a stretch, followed by consolidation therapy cycles that could extend treatment across many months. The specialist who had evaluated Destiny in Atlanta had referred her to the Winship Cancer Institute at Emory University, located on Clifton Road in Atlanta's Druid Hills neighborhood, which was among the most highly regarded cancer centers in the southeastern United States, nationally ranked for its blood cancer program and connected to Emory University Hospital's full clinical resources. The challenge was not finding the right place. The right place had already been found. The challenge was everything surrounding it: the financial weight of treatment, the gap between what Destiny's student health insurance through Georgia State University covered and what her actual care would cost. The housing situation: her campus apartment was not equipped for a person undergoing chemotherapy, and moving back to Orlando would take her away from her treatment center. The question of whether Marcus could afford to go to Atlanta and stay, which on a driver's salary in a furnished city apartment, was not a simple yes. All of it together formed a wall, not one impossibly high barrier, but many medium-height barriers standing side by side, which in practical terms is often worse, because you can see over any single one of them, and so you keep thinking you can manage, and the managing exhausts you before you have made any real progress. Shaq listened to all of it. He heard the wall, piece by piece, as Marcus described it. When Marcus finished, the room was quiet again. Shaq set down his coffee mug. He looked at the medical papers on the coffee table. He looked at the Winship Cancer Institute printout specifically, and he recognized the name the way he had known he would. He had been there in 2016, had walked those corridors, had met people who worked in that building, and understood what they were doing there and how well they were doing it. He looked at the photograph of Destiny on the wall one more time. Then he looked at Marcus. "You said she decided she wanted to be a nurse when she was 14, Shaq said, after watching the nurses take care of Claudette. "Yes," Marcus said. 9 years, Shaq said. "Never changed her mind, not once." Shaq nodded slowly. He was quiet for a moment, in the particular way of a man who is not hesitating but thinking, ordering things, making the internal calculations that precede a decision that has already been made. "She's going to be a nurse," Shaq said. It was not a question. It was not a comfort. It was stated as straightforward fact, the way you state things when you intend to help make them true. Marcus looked at him. "She's going to be a nurse," Shaq said again. "But first she needs to get well. And to get well, she needs good doctors, and a place to be, and the money stuff handled, so you two are not spending energy on the money stuff that you need to spend on getting her well." He paused. "I know somebody at Winship. I'm going to make a call today. Is that all right with you?" Marcus was very still. "I don't want charity," he said. The words came out reflexive, automatic. The response of a man for whom independence was not a preference, but a deeply ingrained identity. Something his mother had stitched into him in Ocala, along with everything else she had taught him. Shaq shook his head. "It's not charity," he said. "You worked for me for 5 years. You showed up every single morning. You knew about the grapes. You knew about the Gatorade. You sat in that car for 4 hours outside Universal, without one word of complaint. And when I had a bad night, you drove me home in silence, because you knew that was exactly what I needed." He leaned forward slightly in the wooden chair. "You took care of me, Marcus. For 5 years you took care of me. You think I'm not going to take care of you?" The room was very quiet. Marcus looked at the table. His jaw was working again, the way it did when he was trying to keep something inside. "She watched those nurses with her mama," Marcus said, very quietly. "She watched them, and she decided that was what a good life looked like, taking care of people who couldn't take care of themselves." He stopped. Then, barely above a whisper, "She's 23 years old." "I know," Shaq said. "She's got her whole life in front of her." "I know that too." A long silence. Then Marcus looked up. His eyes were clear now, not empty, not defeated, but clear in the way eyes get when a person has stopped fighting the thing they need to accept. "Okay," Marcus said. "Make the call." Shaq stood up from the wooden chair for the second time. He pulled his phone from his pocket. He walked to the window. the one that looked out over the parking lot of the complex, the chain-link fence, the gray February morning, and he dialed a number from his contacts. A name connected to a visit to Emory University 3 years ago, kept in his phone the way he kept many things, quietly, against future need, with the instinct of a man who has learned that the world is smaller than it appears, and that the right connection at the right moment can change everything. The phone rang twice. Someone answered, and Shaquille O'Neal, the man who had shattered backboards and won 4 championships and sold platinum albums and built a business empire from the ground up, began, in a quiet voice, in a small apartment on West Conroy Road in Orlando, Florida, to dismantle a wall, one phone call at a time. The first call lasted 11 minutes. Shaq stood at the window of Marcus's apartment the entire time, looking out at the parking lot below, the chain-link fence, a crow sitting on top of it doing nothing in particular, a child's red tricycle tipped on its side near the dumpster enclosure. He did not pace. He did not gesture. He stood very still, in the way that large, focused people sometimes do when the thing they are concentrating on requires all of them. The person he called was a woman named Dr. Adrienne Caldwell. Dr. Caldwell was a hematologic oncologist, a blood cancer specialist, connected to the Winship Cancer Institute at Emory University on Clifton Road in Atlanta. Shaq had met her in October 2016 during a charitable visit to Emory, organized through the Shaquille O'Neal Foundation, which has operated since 2001 with a central focus on providing disadvantaged young people with access to education, healthcare resources, and opportunity. The visit had been part of a broader awareness campaign around health equity, the idea that where you are born and how much money your family has should not determine the quality of medical care you receive, which is an idea Shaq had believed in specifically and personally for a long time. Dr. Caldwell had given him a tour of the oncology wing that day. She was direct and precise, and completely unimpressed by celebrity in the best possible way. She had spoken to him as a peer, as someone capable of understanding complexity if it was explained clearly, and he had respected her immediately for it. They had stayed loosely in contact afterward, the way people do when a meeting has been genuinely meaningful. Occasional emails, a shared fundraising initiative in 2018, the kind of connection that is not active but is real. He called her now. She answered on the second ring. "Shaq," she said. "This is a surprise. Good surprise or bad surprise?" he asked. "Depends what you need," she said, which was exactly the kind of answer he had hoped for. He told her about destiny. He told her clearly, and without embellishment, the diagnosis, acute myeloid leukemia, confirmed by a specialist in Atlanta. The patient's age, 23. The referral already made to Winship. The fact that the family had limited financial resources and that the gap between what the insurance covered and what the treatment would actually cost was a gap he wanted to close before it became a crisis. He said, "I want to make sure she gets everything she needs, whatever the insurance doesn't cover, the genetic panel, the specialized testing, whatever it is, I want that handled, and I want her seen by the best person you have on AML. Not the second best, the best." Dr. Caldwell was quiet for a moment, not a hesitant silence, a thinking one. "She already has a referral to us?" Dr. Caldwell asked. "Already made. Then she's in the system. I can make sure her file is flagged and that our best AML team lead is assigned when she comes in for evaluation." A pause. "The financial piece. I'm going to connect you with our patient services coordinator. Her name is Vanessa Okafor. She handles exactly this. Give her your contact, and she'll work through what's needed. Tell her to call Brianna Holloway," Shaq said. "My assistant. She'll have everything." "Okay," Dr. Caldwell said. "Then, this young woman, she's someone's daughter?" "She's my driver's daughter," Shaq said. "He raised her alone. She's been in nursing school. She decided she wanted to be a nurse when she was 14 years old, because of what she saw in a hospital room when her mother was sick. A brief silence on the line. "That's the kind of person we want to get back to work," Dr. Caldwell said quietly. "Yes," Shaq said. "It is." He hung up and stood at the window for a moment. The crow on the chain-link fence had not moved. The red tricycle was still tipped on its side. He turned back to the room. Marcus was watching him from the couch with the expression of a man who is witnessing something he has not fully made sense of yet. Something that does not fit inside his existing understanding of how the world works, of who helps whom, and why, and what the conditions are. His whole life he had understood the transaction of service. You show up, you do the work, you go home. You do not expect anything beyond the paycheck. You do not position yourself to receive. That was the code Marcus had been given, and had lived by, without questioning it. Shaq put his phone back in his pocket. "One down," he said simply. "Few more to make." Marcus opened his mouth. Shaq held up one hand. Not rudely, just with the quiet authority of a man who has been in enough negotiations to know when talking will slow things down. "Let me finish," Shaq said. "Then we'll talk." Marcus closed his mouth. He nodded. The second call went to Brianna Holloway. It took 4 minutes. Shaq relayed what Dr. Caldwell had told him and gave Brianna 2 instructions. First, make contact with Vanessa Okafor at Winship's Patient Financial Services Department and authorize whatever was needed to cover the gaps in Destiny Webb's insurance for the full treatment period. Not a capped amount, the full treatment period. Second, find a furnished short-term rental within walking distance of the Winship Cancer Institute on Clifton Road in Atlanta. 2 bedrooms, ground floor or elevator access, available immediately, 3 months minimum with an option to extend. "Today?" Brianna asked. "Today," he said. She did not sigh or question or negotiate. She said, "I'll send you options within 2 hours." He hung up. The third call was different. It went not to a doctor or an assistant, but to a personal contact at Georgia State University. A connection made through a mutual friend in Atlanta's business community. A person connected to the university's administrative structure. The call was shorter, more conversational, but its purpose was specific and practical. Shaq wanted to understand what formal protections existed for a student facing a medical crisis. What paperwork would Destiny need to file to protect her enrollment while taking medical leave? Whether her financial aid would be affected? Whether the clinical hours she had already completed at Grady Memorial Hospital would be preserved, or whether she would have to restart them when she returned? He asked good questions. He wrote nothing down, because he didn't need to. He had always had an exceptional memory for the things that mattered, and this mattered. He thanked the contact, confirmed that Brianna would follow up with the relevant administrative offices, and ended the call. Then he stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, phone in hand, and thought. He thought about whether he had missed anything. He ran through the wall Marcus had described, the pieces of it, the individual barriers standing side by side. Medical access, handled. Financial gap, in motion. Housing near the treatment center. Brianna was on it. Enrollment protection. Follow-up scheduled. Marcus's ability to be present with Destiny without losing his income, that one remained. He walked back to the coffee table. He sat down in the wooden chair again. "Your job," Shaq said. "Your income. While you're in Atlanta." Marcus shook his head. "That's not something you need to—" "I'm not asking," Shaq said, not harshly. "Just clearly. You've been on my payroll for 5 years. You're still on my payroll. Nothing changes on that end until you tell me you're ready to come back, or you tell me something different. Whatever you need." Marcus looked at him for a long moment. "Why?" Marcus asked. The word was simple, genuine, without accusation. He was not challenging the generosity. He was genuinely trying to understand it, trying to locate it inside the framework of the world as he had always understood it, where people in Shaq's position did not do this for people in Marcus's position. not without a reason that made transactional sense. Shaq leaned forward in the chair, elbows on his knees, his hands clasped in front of him. "My stepfather's name is Philip Harrison," he said. "He raised me. He was a military man, Army sergeant, moved us around a lot. Newark, Germany, San Antonio. He was strict. He demanded things from me. He did not let me get away with a single thing." He paused. "But when it counted, when I really needed something, he was there. No conditions, no calculation, just there." He looked at Marcus steadily. "I've had a lot of people in my life who showed up because of what I could do for them. And I've had a very small number of people who showed up because of who they are. You're the second kind, Marcus. You have been since the first day." The room was quiet. Marcus looked at the table. His jaw was tight again, but differently now, not holding grief in, but holding something else. Something that did not have a clean name. Gratitude that was too large for the word gratitude. Recognition. The specific and overwhelming feeling of being correctly seen by someone whose opinion of you, it turns out, has mattered more than you allowed yourself to know. "Claudette would have liked you," Marcus said finally, very quietly, almost to himself. Shaq smiled. "The real one." "Tell me about her," he said, and so Marcus told him. Claudette Marie Webb, born in Gainesville, Florida, in 1963, the third of 5 children. She had a laugh, Marcus said, that you could hear from 2 rooms away, and that made strangers in grocery stores turn around and smile without knowing why. She could cook anything, not fancy things, not elaborate things, but the kind of food that made a house feel lived in. Collard greens that took all day. Cornbread that came out of a cast-iron skillet. A sweet potato pie at Thanksgiving that her own mother had taught her to make, and that Destiny had learned to make after Claudette was gone, following a handwritten recipe card that was now kept in a Ziploc bag inside the cookbook drawer because the paper had become too fragile to handle without care. She had worked as a medical billing specialist for a clinic on South Orange Avenue in Orlando for 16 years. She was good at her job, methodical, patient, impossible to rattle. She had been the kind of person other people called when something was broken, not because she always had the answer, but because her voice on the phone made the problem feel smaller and the solution feel possible. She had loved Marcus with a steadiness that he said, quietly, had ruined him for anything less. When she got sick, Marcus said, she was more worried about us than about herself. Right up until the end. She kept asking me, "Is Destiny okay? Is Destiny doing her homework? Is Destiny eating enough?" 11 years old, and Claudette was lying in that hospital bed, worrying about whether our daughter was eating enough. He shook his head slowly. That was who she was. Shaq listened to all of it. This was, Marcus would think later, one of the things he had not expected. Not the phone calls, not the financial help, not the coffee made with exactly 12 stirs. He had not expected Shaq to ask about Claudette. He had not expected to be given space to tell the story of his wife to this enormous, famous, endlessly busy man who had somewhere else to be and had come here anyway, and was now sitting in a wooden kitchen chair on a cold Friday morning in a small apartment on West Conroy Road, asking about a woman he had never met. But Shaq asked, and Marcus answered, and the telling of it, the saying of Claudette's name out loud in a room where someone was listening, really listening, did something for Marcus that nothing else in the previous 6 days had done. It lightened him, slightly, just enough. By the time Shaq stood to leave, it was past 11 in the morning. He had been there for nearly 2 hours. Terrell was waiting in the rented Explorer at the curb, doing what good drivers do, waiting without complaint, engine off, making himself invisible. At the door, Marcus stopped him. "Wait," Marcus said. He went to the kitchen. He came back with the brown paper bag, the Panda Express bag from the counter, the one that had been sitting there since the morning Marcus had tried and failed to maintain normalcy. 2 containers of orange chicken, days old, completely cold, wrapped in their own sad stillness. "I was going to bring this," Marcus said. He looked at the bag. "The morning when I came to the house, I was going to bring it for you. Orange chicken. It's what you—" He stopped. "I know it's what you like. I know, because I pay attention. And then I sat in the driveway and I couldn't go in, and I couldn't call, and I couldn't do anything except leave, and I just—" He stopped again. His hands tightened on the bag. "I left you a note," Marcus said. "In the back seat, under the bag. Did you get it?" Shaq shook his head. "Terrell said there was a bag in the car. I haven't been back to check it." Marcus nodded. He put the Panda Express bag down on the table by the door. He looked at it for a moment. "It doesn't say much," Marcus said. "The note. I couldn't. The words weren't coming right. I just wrote what I could." "It's okay," Shaq said. "It's not enough," Marcus said. "For everything, it's nowhere near enough." Shaq put his hand on the door handle. He paused and looked back at Marcus, standing there in his gray sweatshirt in the doorway of his small, clean apartment, holding himself together with the same quiet determination that had gotten him through 12 years of early mornings with the Orlando Magic, and 5 more years of early mornings for Shaq, and a wife's illness and a wife's death, and a daughter raised alone, and 9 years of believing in a nursing degree that was now, temporarily, on hold. "When Destiny gets better," Shaq said, "and she will get better. You tell her I said she's going to be the best nurse in Atlanta. You tell her I know that, because her daddy is the most reliable person I ever met in my life. And that doesn't happen by accident." Marcus looked at him. "I'll tell her," he said. Shaq nodded. He opened the door. The cold February air came in, carrying the distant sound of wind chimes from somewhere above them, on the second-floor landing. "I'll be in touch," Shaq said. "Brianna will call you today about Atlanta. You pick the place you want. She'll send you options. Whatever feels right for you and Destiny." He walked out into the cold morning, down the exterior stairs, across the parking lot to where Terrell was waiting at the curb. He got in the back seat. Terrell pulled out without a word. As the Explorer turned out of the apartment complex and onto West Conroy Road, Shaq looked back through the rear window. Marcus was still at the door, still standing, watching the car go the way people watch things they are not yet ready to stop looking at. Shaq raised one hand. Marcus raised his. Then the car turned, and the complex disappeared, and there was just the road ahead, and the gray February sky, and the particular silence of a man who has done the thing that needed doing, and does not feel the need to talk about it. What happened in the days that followed moved with the quiet efficiency of things arranged by people who know how to arrange things. Brianna Holloway contacted Vanessa Okafor at Winship's Patient Financial Services office on the afternoon of February 15th. By end of business that same day, Destiny Webb's file had been flagged. Her evaluation appointment moved to the earliest available slot, February 22nd, and a financial assistance authorization was in process that would cover the gap between her Georgia State University student health insurance and the full cost of her treatment protocol. The furnished apartment on Clifton Road in Atlanta, a 2-bedroom, ground-floor unit in a quiet complex 3 blocks from the Winship Cancer Institute, was confirmed and prepaid through May 15th, with a written option to extend through August. Brianna found it, vetted it, and sent Marcus the details in a text message that evening. The message was straightforward and warm. That was Brianna's particular gift, making logistics feel human. Marcus read it 4 times. He called his daughter. "Baby," he said, "I need you to listen to me," he told her. "Not everything. Not yet. Not the full shape of it. Just the essential parts. That the apartment near Winship was covered. That the financial piece was handled. That she should pack what she needed, and he would drive up, and they would figure out the rest together." Destiny was quiet for a long time on the other end. "Daddy," she said, "who did this?" Marcus was quiet. "Daddy?" "Some help came through," he said. It was the truth. It was also, in the particular way that Marcus Webb operated, the minimum amount of truth required to answer the question. Enough to satisfy the facts, not enough to shift the story away from where he wanted it centered, which was on Destiny and what she needed, and not on who had provided it. Destiny, being 23 and smart and a nursing student, was not entirely satisfied with this answer, but she let it go. For now, because she had a bag to pack and a life to reorganize and a disease to face, and those things required the full weight of her attention. "Okay," she said. "Okay, Daddy, come get me." Marcus drove to Atlanta on February 19th. He took Interstate 75 north, the long, familiar highway that runs from Florida up through Georgia like a seam in the land, through Gainesville and Valdosta and Tifton, and the long, flat middle of Georgia where the pine forests go on longer than you think they will, and the roadside billboards advertise fireworks and Pedros south of the border, and the occasional evangelical message printed large enough to read at 70 miles per hour. He drove the Honda Accord, the one with the clicking heater and the scratch on the rear left window. He had his gospel station on, low. A cup of instant coffee in the cup holder stirred 12 times before he left the apartment, his small suitcase in the trunk, his pocket Bible on the passenger seat. It took 6 hours and 40 minutes. When he pulled up outside Destiny's campus apartment in Atlanta's East Point neighborhood, she was already waiting outside on the steps, with 2 suitcases and a canvas tote bag with her nursing school logo on it. She was wearing a blue winter coat, and her hair was in 2 braids, and when she saw the Honda Accord come around the corner, she stood up from the steps, and the look on her face was the look of a person who has been frightened for days and has just seen something safe arrive. Marcus got out of the car. They held each other for a long time in the Georgia winter, without saying anything. That was enough. That was everything. He put her suitcases in the trunk. She got in the passenger seat. She looked at the pocket Bible. She looked at the gospel station, which was playing something slow and certain and old. "You still listen to this?" she asked. "Since before you were born," he said. She smiled. She leaned her head back against the headrest. He pulled out onto the street. They drove toward Clifton Road, toward the apartment, toward the Winship Cancer Institute 3 blocks away, toward whatever came next. The clicking heater came on and filled the car with warm air. Destiny closed her eyes. Marcus drove. Outside, Atlanta moved past the windows, the neighborhoods changing gradually from residential to institutional, the Emory University campus appearing on the left, with its brick buildings and its old trees, and its long sense of purpose. The Winship Cancer Institute building came into view ahead, its signage calm and official against the winter sky. Marcus slowed as they passed it. Destiny opened her eyes and looked at it through the passenger window. She looked at it for a long time. Her face was unreadable in the way young people's faces become unreadable when they are confronting something large and have not yet decided how to feel about it. Then she turned away from the window and looked forward at the road. "I'm going to beat this, Daddy," she said. She said it the same way she had said 9 years ago at age 14, sitting in the front seat of this same car on a dark highway outside Orlando. "I'm going to be a nurse, Daddy, like Gloria, certain, unhedged." The statement of someone who has decided. Marcus kept his eyes on the road. "I know you are," he said. He had believed it the first time she said something with that voice. He believed it now. Back in Orlando 2 days later, Shaq retrieved the black Escalade from his driveway where it had sat since the morning of February 12th. He opened the back door. The brown paper bag from Panda Express on International Drive was on the seat, exactly where Marcus had left it. Cold and long since finished with being food. He picked it up and looked at it for a moment. The logo, familiar and ordinary, the kind of thing you pass 100 times without seeing. He set it aside. Underneath it, on the dark upholstery of the back seat, was a small square of paper, folded once. A piece of lined notebook paper, torn from a yellow legal pad, the tear line uneven in the way of quick decisions. He picked it up. He unfolded it. The handwriting was Marcus's. Careful, old-school cursive. The handwriting of a generation taught that how you formed your letters said something about how you valued the person receiving them. 4 words. He read them. He read them again. Then, Shaquille O'Neal, who had stood in front of 20,000 screaming people at Lollapalooza without flinching, who had absorbed every kind of physical punishment the NBA could deliver, and stood back up every time, who had built an empire from the ground up and watched it grow and never let the watching make him small. He sat down on the front steps of his home in Isleworth, Windermere, Florida, in the thin February morning light, the lake behind the house going pink and silver in the early sun, and he pressed the piece of notebook paper flat against his knee, and he cried. Not for long, but genuinely. The way you cry when something hits you in exactly the place where you are most human, the place underneath the accomplishments and the size and the reputation and the noise, the place that is just a person, looking at 4 words written by another person who did not know how to say enough and said it anyway. 4 words. You know what they say, but you do not yet know, not fully, not completely, what those 4 words set in motion in the months that followed. That part of the story is almost here. February 22nd, 2019, arrived the way important days sometimes do, unremarkably, without fanfare, looking from the outside exactly like any other Friday morning in Atlanta. The sky over Druid Hills was the particular gray of a Georgia winter that cannot decide whether to commit to clouds or let some light through. The trees along Clifton Road were bare and patient, the way February trees are, holding their branches up like empty hands, waiting. The Winship Cancer Institute building sat solid and purposeful at the end of the drive, its entrance lit with the kind of steady institutional light that says, without words, people come here when things are serious. We are prepared for that. Marcus parked the Honda Accord in the visitor lot at 8:47 in the morning. He turned off the engine. The clicking heater went quiet. The gospel station faded to silence. He sat for a moment with his hands in his lap and looked at the building through the windshield and did what he had been doing, privately and without audience, every morning since February 11th. He prayed. Not long, not elaborate, just the essential thing. The same request repeated in slightly different words every day, like a man who understands that persistence in prayer is its own form of faith. Let her be okay. Let them help her. Let her come through this hole. Destiny sat beside him in the passenger seat. She was wearing her blue winter coat again, hair in 2 braids again, the canvas nursing school tote on her lap. She had her hands folded on top of the bag. She was looking at the building with the steady, forward gaze of someone who has made a decision about how they are going to face something and is not going to revisit that decision. Ready? Marcus asked. No, Destiny said. A pause. Me neither, Marcus said. She looked at him. He looked at her. Something passed between them. The specific understanding that moves between parents and children who have been through real things together, who have stood at the edge of something terrible before and found each other still standing afterward. Let's go anyway, Destiny said. They got out of the car. The intake process at Winship was thorough and long and full of the particular bureaucratic texture of serious medicine. Forms and wristbands and waiting rooms with muted televisions and people in various stages of their own private battles sitting in chairs around the perimeter, each one an entire world of fear and hope and determination that the bland beige walls could not contain. Marcus sat in a chair with his hands on his knees and his pocket Bible in his breast pocket, and he watched the door through which Destiny had disappeared with a nurse and did not move from that chair for 3 hours. He had brought his James Patterson novel, the new one, the one from the Barnes & Noble gift card. It sat unopened in his coat pocket. He did not read it. What he did not know, sitting in that waiting room, was what was happening on the other side of the door. What was happening was this. Dr. Miriam Osei, Winship's lead specialist in acute myeloid leukemia, a woman who had trained at Johns Hopkins and spent 21 years building one of the most respected AML practices in the southeastern United States, was meeting Destiny Webb for the first time. Dr. Osei was 53 years old, originally from Accra, Ghana, with close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses that she wore on a plain silver chain, and a way of explaining complex medical realities that managed to be both completely honest and genuinely kind, a combination rarer in medicine than it should be. She had been personally briefed on Destiny's case by Dr. Adrian Caldwell 2 days earlier. She had reviewed the preliminary blood work and the initial specialist report from the Atlanta physician who had first flagged the diagnosis. She had formed her initial picture. She sat across from Destiny in an examination room and she said, "I want to tell you what we're looking at, and I want to tell you straight. Is that what you want?" Destiny said, "I'm a nursing student. Tell me exactly what's happening." Dr. Osei looked at her for a moment over the reading glasses. "Good," she said. "That makes this easier." What followed was 40 minutes of the most important conversation of Destiny Webb's life. The full clinical picture laid out in plain language. The treatment plan explained step by step. The realistic timeline described without false softening. Induction chemotherapy beginning within 10 days, if Destiny agreed to proceed at Winship. A first cycle lasting approximately 4 to 6 weeks, during which she would be hospitalized for close monitoring. The goal of induction was remission, pushing the disease back far enough that the body could begin to recover. Consolidation therapy would follow, additional cycles designed to maintain and deepen that remission. The total treatment arc could extend across 6 months or more, depending on how her body responded. Dr. Osei paused at intervals to ask if Destiny had questions. Destiny had many questions. She asked them in the organized, specific way of someone who has spent 2 years learning to think clinically, not just what, but why. Not just what happens, but what it means and what comes after. Dr. Osei answered every one of them fully, and at a certain point, she took off her reading glasses and let them hang on the silver chain, and looked at Destiny with something that was not quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. "You said you're a nursing student," Dr. Osei said. "Yes, ma'am. Georgia State, Burdine F. Lewis College." "What year?" "Would have been 3rd-year clinical rotations. I was at Grady." Dr. Osei nodded slowly. "Oncology? General med-surg right now. But oncology is where I want to end up." Destiny paused. "My mom had cancer, breast cancer. I was 11 when she died. The nurses on her unit were—" She stopped for a moment, the way she always stopped on this part of the story, gathering it. "They were the ones who made it human. The doctors told us what was happening. The nurses made us feel like we weren't alone in it." Dr. Osei was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that Destiny would think about for the rest of her life. "The nurses are always the ones who make it human," Dr. Osei said. "I've been doing this for 21 years, and I have never once seen that change." She picked up her pen. "We're going to get you back to Grady, Destiny. That's the plan. That's what we're working toward." Destiny held herself together for exactly 4 more seconds. Then she stopped trying. In the waiting room, Marcus was on his 3rd cup of terrible vending machine coffee when his phone rang. He looked at the screen. "Shaq," he answered. "How'd the drive up go?" Shaq asked. No preamble. Straight to the thing that mattered. 6 hours, 40 minutes, Marcus said. "She slept most of Georgia." "Good," Shaq said. "She's at Winship now?" "Inside right now. I'm in the waiting room." Marcus looked at the door. "She's been in there a while." "That's okay," Shaq said. "That means they're being thorough. You want thorough." A pause. "You eat anything today?" Marcus looked at the vending machine coffee in his hand. "Coffee." A sound on the line that was not quite a sigh. "Marcus?" "I'm not hungry," That's not what I asked. Marcus almost smiled. Almost. I'll find something when she comes out. You'll find something before she comes out, Shaq said. Because when she comes out, she's going to need you to be the steady one. And you can't be steady on 3 coffees and no food. That's not biology. That's just facts. Marcus looked around the waiting room. Down the hall there was a small cafe attached to the main lobby. He had noticed it when they came in. The smell of something warm and real had drifted past him, and he had ignored it because eating had felt beside the point. "There's a cafe," Marcus said. "Go," Shaq said. "Text me when you know something." "I will." A brief pause. Then Shaq said, "She's going to fight this thing, Marcus. I already know it. She's got your stubbornness." "She has her mother's stubbornness," Marcus said. "Even better," Shaq said. He hung up. Marcus sat for one more moment. Then he got up and walked to the cafe and ordered a turkey sandwich, and sat at a small table by the window and ate all of it, methodically, without tasting much of it, but completely. Because Shaq was right, and Marcus knew it, and knowing it was enough. Destiny came through the waiting room door at 12:31 in the afternoon. Marcus was back in his chair by then. He stood up when he saw her. She looked tired. Her eyes had the slightly swollen look of someone who has been crying, but has also been doing other things at the same time. Processing, deciding, organizing. Her chin was up. Her shoulders were back. She was carrying the canvas tote bag over one arm, and in her other hand she held a folder of papers. Treatment information, appointment schedules, the printed architecture of what came next. She walked directly to her father. She put her head against his chest. He put both arms around her and held her the way he had held her on Midway Road in Orlando in 2007 when they drove home from the hospital the night Claudette died, and the way he had held her at her kindergarten door on her first day of school when she had briefly reconsidered the whole enterprise of growing up, and every time in between when the world had been too much and she had needed to be held by the one person who had been there for all of it. "Dr. Osei is incredible," Destiny said against his chest. Her voice was muffled but clear. "She's honest. She doesn't sugarcoat anything. I love her already." "Good doctor?" Marcus asked. "The best kind," Destiny said. "The kind that talks to you like you're a person." She pulled back and looked up at him. Her eyes were steady now. "We start in 10 days, Daddy. Induction therapy. I'll be admitted for about a month." He nodded. "It's going to be hard," she said. "I know. I'm going to be sick. I know. But Dr. Osei said..." She stopped, looked at the folder in her hand. She said, "We're working toward getting me back to Grady." Those were her exact words. "Working toward getting you back to Grady. Not if. Toward." She looked back up at him. "So that's what we're doing. We're working toward Grady." Marcus reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. A gesture from her childhood, automatic and tender. "That's what we're doing," he said. What followed in the weeks after that morning was something that cannot be described as anything other than hard. Let us not pretend otherwise. Acute myeloid leukemia treatment is not a gentle process. It is a deliberate and aggressive chemical assault on a body, designed to destroy cancer cells, but doing significant damage to healthy cells in the process. Destiny was admitted to Emory University Hospital on March 4, 2019, to begin her first cycle of induction chemotherapy. She lost her hair by the second week. She lost it gradually, and then all at once, the way these things go, and Marcus drove her to a beauty supply store on Memorial Drive in Atlanta, and she picked out 2 silk head wraps, one navy blue and one a deep burgundy, and wore them with the matter-of-fact dignity of a woman who has decided that what is happening to her body does not get to decide what happens to her spirit. She was nauseous for long stretches. There were days when eating was nearly impossible, when the anti-nausea medications helped only partially, and the smell of food that would normally have been appealing was enough to send her reaching for the basin. There were nights when her fever spiked, and the nurses came quickly, and Marcus sat in the chair beside her bed and watched their hands, quick and certain and gentle, and thought about Gloria with the reading glasses on the beaded chain who had squeezed Claudette's hand every time she left the room. He thought about a 14-year-old girl watching those hands and deciding who she was going to be. He thought about the fact that his daughter was now on the receiving end of exactly what she had spent 9 years training to give. He held her hand when she needed it. He sat in the chair when she slept. He walked to the cafe in the lobby of Emory University Hospital at regular intervals and ate actual food, because Shaq had told him to, and because it was true that he could not be the steady one if he came apart himself. He read his James Patterson novel, finally in those long, quiet hospital hours. And when he finished it, he started it again, because it was the only one he had, and starting it again felt better than sitting with nothing in his hands. He texted Shaq updates. Short ones, factual, Marcus style. Day 8. Rough day. Fever overnight but gone by morning. She's sleeping. Or, Day 14. Better today. She asked for soup. Good sign. Or, Day 19. She made a joke. The nurse laughed. I think we're okay. Shaq responded to every one of them. Also short. That was the language they had developed between them. The shared dialect of two people who understood that less is sometimes more. Hear you. Keeping you both in my prayers. Or, soup is a great sign. Keep me posted. Or, in response to the joke, that's my girl. Tell her I said so. On the morning of March 28, 2019, 24 days into Destiny's induction therapy, Marcus was sitting in the hallway outside her room, eating a granola bar, when Dr. Osei came down the corridor with a tablet in her hand and the particular quality of walk that Marcus had learned over these weeks meant she had something to say. She stopped in front of him. She looked at the granola bar in his hand. Is that your breakfast? It's my second breakfast, Marcus said. She almost smiled. Mr. Webb, she said, can you come inside? They went in. Destiny was awake, sitting up in bed with the navy blue wrap on her head and her nursing school tote bag on the bedside table because she had taken to keeping it there. A talisman, a reminder of where she was going. Dr. Osei stood at the foot of the bed. She looked at Destiny first, then at Marcus. Then back at Destiny. Your day 25 bone marrow results came back this morning, she said. The room was very still. We are seeing significantly reduced blast cells, Dr. Osei said. The leukemia is responding to treatment. She paused. Destiny, you are moving toward remission. The silence lasted 3 full seconds. Then Marcus sat down on the edge of the nearest chair, not gracefully, not deliberately, but the way a person sits when their legs have made a decision independent of the rest of them. Destiny did not cry immediately. She stared at Dr. Osei for a moment, with the expression of someone receiving information that is too large to process at normal speed. Her hands were flat on the bed on either side of her. Moving toward, Destiny said. Not there yet. Not yet, Dr. Osei said honestly. We continue the protocol, but this is the response we were hoping to see. This is good news, Destiny. This is genuinely good news. Destiny looked at her father. Marcus was looking at the ceiling. His lips were moving slightly, in the way they moved when he was praying. The same quiet, persistent, low-word prayer he had been saying every morning since February 11th, now modified, now different, now containing something it had not contained before. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Destiny reached over and took his hand. He looked down at her. Call him, she said. She did not say who. She did not need to. Marcus picked up his phone with his free hand. He found the contact. He pressed call. Shaq answered before the second ring. Marcus, he said. You okay? Marcus tried to speak. The words did not come immediately. He pressed his lips together. Marcus, Shaq said again, and this time there was something careful in his voice. A bracing. "She's going into remission," Marcus said. 3 words that had never in his life cost him more to produce, or felt more like something being lifted from his chest as he said them. A long pause on the line. Then Shaq said, quietly, "There it is. Not 'I told you so'. Not 'I knew it'. Just, 'there it is.' The specific acknowledgement of a thing hoped for that has finally arrived. Simple. True. Enough. There it is," Marcus said. On the morning of June 14, 2019, Dr. Miriam Osei sat across from Destiny Webb in an examination room at the Winship Cancer Institute and told her that her most recent bone marrow biopsy showed no detectable leukemia cells. Complete remission. Destiny sat with this information for a moment. Then she reached into the canvas nursing school tote on her lap and pulled out a piece of paper, a handmade sign, drawn in black marker on the back of a piece of printer paper, the letters large and slightly uneven from being written in a hurry on a hospital tray table the night before, when she had somehow already known. The sign read, "First round winner." She held it up. Dr. Osei looked at it. This time she did not almost smile. She smiled completely. Destiny took the photo herself, asked a nurse in the corridor to take it, actually, standing in the courtyard of Emory University Hospital in a patch of Georgia June sunlight, the sky finally and fully committed to blue, the trees fully committed to green, the world looking the way it looks when it has decided to cooperate. She was thin. She was still wearing the navy blue wrap. She was standing straight with her chin up and her shoulders set, and the handmade sign held at chest height. And the smile on her face was the same one that lived in the photograph on the wall above Marcus's television on West Conroy Road. The one that did not know yet what was coming. Except now it was different. Now the smile knew exactly what had come, and it had stayed anyway. She sent the photo to her father first. Then she composed a text message to a number she had saved in her phone, as SO, because Destiny Webb was, in this as in most things, economical and precise. She wrote the message carefully. She rewrote it twice. Then she sent it. It arrived on Shaq's phone at 2:23 in the afternoon on June 14, 2019. He was on a bus in New York City, traveling between Madison Square Garden and a hotel on 7th Avenue ahead of that evening's TNT NBA playoff broadcast. The bus was full of production staff and assistants, and the particular organized noise of a television crew in motion. He read the message. He read it again. He turned to the man sitting next to him, Ernie Johnson, gray-haired and steady, and one of the finest human beings in sports broadcasting. A man who had faced his own serious health battle when he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2003, and had come through it with a grace that had deepened everyone around him. Shaq handed Ernie the phone without a word. Ernie read the message. He handed the phone back. "That's a good kid," Ernie said. "Her daddy's a good man," Shaq said. He typed his reply. He thought about it for a moment. Then he sent it and put the phone in his pocket and looked out the bus window at Manhattan moving past in the afternoon light. The yellow cabs and the steam rising from the grates, and the 10 million people going about their 10 million days, each one a story that the city did not have time to slow down and tell. He thought about a 23-year-old woman in a hospital courtyard in Atlanta holding a handmade sign. He thought about a 51-year-old man in a waiting room on Clifton Road eating a turkey sandwich because someone told him he needed to be the steady one. He thought about a piece of notebook paper, folded once, lying on the dark upholstery of a back seat under a cold paper bag. He thought about 4 words. He thought about what those 4 words had started. And here, finally, is where the cliffhanger ends. Here is where the promise made in the very first line of this story is fully kept. You have known since chapter 1 that Marcus left a note. You have known it said 4 words. You have waded through 2 men learning to trust each other, through 5 years of quiet loyalty and early mornings and red seedless grapes. You have waited through a February morning, when a door opened on a small apartment on West Conroy Road, and a large man sat down in a small chair and made coffee with exactly 12 stirs. You have waited through phone calls and medical appointments and a hospital corridor, and a bone marrow biopsy, and a handmade sign held up in a patch of Georgia sunlight. The 4 words are, sorry, family emergency, thank you. You knew that. You have known it since Chapter 3, when Marcus told Shaq there was a note in the back seat. But what you did not know, what the cliffhanger was actually holding back, was not the words themselves. It was what those words did. Because Shaquille O'Neal read that note on the front steps of his Isleworth home on a February morning, and sat with those 4 words and understood, for the first time with the full weight of understanding, what 5 years of someone's quiet, uncomplaining loyalty actually looked like from the inside, what it cost, what it was worth, and what it meant that the person who had given it had still, at the end, in the middle of the worst moment of his life, thought to say thank you. He had been thanked by presidents and Hall of Famers and fans in 60 countries. He had received standing ovations in Madison Square Garden and Staples Center, and arenas whose names he sometimes had to look up. He had received awards and tributes and honorary degrees, and every category of public recognition the world offers its most accomplished people. None of it had hit him the way 4 words in old-school cursive on a piece of torn notebook paper hit him that morning. Because those 4 words were not for the performance of him. They were for the person underneath it, and being seen, truly seen, by someone who has watched you from the front seat for 5 years without agenda or angle or expectation, turns out to be the thing that reaches the part of a person that nothing else can reach. Not the trophies, not the television, not the platinum albums or the championship rings. Just, thank you. Just, I saw you. I was grateful. Even now, in the worst moment of my life, I wanted you to know. That is what the note did. It reminded Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal, in the clearest, simplest, most unadorned language possible, that the greatest thing a person can be is someone that another person is genuinely glad exists. He had that, from Marcus Webb, written in careful cursive on a torn piece of yellow legal pad. He keeps the note. He still has it. Summer came to Orlando the way it always does. Not gradually, not politely. All at once, like a decision made overnight, the air thickening into something you could almost hold in your hands, the afternoon sky building its towers of white cloud that turned dark and serious by 3 o'clock, and dropped their rain on the city with the brief, absolute authority of something that has been here long before the buildings and intends to remain long after. The palm trees along the roadways shook and dripped, and by 4 o'clock the storm was gone, and the streets steamed gently in the returning sun, and Orlando went back to its business, as though nothing had interrupted it. Marcus Webb drove back from Atlanta on a Thursday in late June. He took Interstate 75 south, the same highway in reverse, the pine forests and the fireworks billboards, and the long, flat middle of Georgia going past the windows in the opposite order. Destiny was in remission. The furnished apartment on Clifton Road had been their home for 4 months, and now it was time to let it go. And the letting go felt both like a relief and like leaving something behind that had mattered. The courtyard where Destiny had taken her photo, the cafe in the Emory University Hospital lobby where Marcus had eaten more turkey sandwiches than he could count, the corridor where Dr. Osei walked with the particular purposeful stride of a woman who had somewhere important to be and knew it. They had said goodbye to Dr. Miriam Osei on the morning of June 17th. Destiny had hugged her. This surprised Dr. Osei, who was not, by nature or professional habit, a person who expected to be hugged by patients. But she received it with both arms and held it for a full 3 seconds, which Marcus observed from the doorway and noted as a significant data point about the kind of Dr. Osei was when the charts and clipboards were set aside. "You come back and tell me when you're back at Grady," Dr. Osei said when she stepped back. "I want to hear it." "You'll hear it," Destiny said. "I know I will," Dr. Osei said. Then she looked at Marcus. She extended her hand. He shook it. She held it for a moment before releasing it. "Take care of yourself too, Mr. Webb. Not just her. Yourself." "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said. He meant it. He was still working on it. The Honda Accord pulled into the parking lot of the West Conroy Road apartment complex at 4:47 in the afternoon. The clicking heater silent in the June heat. The windows down. The gospel station finding its signal again as they crossed back into Orange County. Destiny sat in the passenger seat and watched her city come back around her. The familiar skyline, the Florida Turnpike exit signs, the Publix on South Kirkman Road where the grocery cart had scratched the rear window. And something in her face settled, the way faces settle when they return to the geography of themselves. "Home," she said. Not a question, a landing. "Home," Marcus confirmed. She stayed for 3 weeks before going back to Atlanta, back to her own apartment, back to the process of medical leave paperwork and re-enrollment conversations with her academic advisor at Georgia State, back to the business of reconstructing the life the diagnosis had interrupted. Her hair was growing back, a soft and close-cropped natural that she had decided, during those months in Atlanta, she liked better than what she'd had before. She was thin still, in the way that serious illness leaves a person thin, as though the body has burned through its reserves and is slowly, carefully rebuilding. But she was strong in the way that mattered. The inner architecture of her was solid, her direction was clear, and the certainty in her eyes had not softened 1 degree. She would return to clinical rotations at Grady Memorial Hospital in January 2020, exactly as planned. She would keep that plan. She was Destiny Webb. Keeping plans was what she did. In July, Marcus went back to work. Not for Shaq. Not yet. For himself first. This was the part of the story that does not always get told about recovery. Not just the patient's recovery, but the family's. The months in Atlanta had taken something from Marcus that he needed to rebuild, quietly and on his own terms. Not his faith. That had held. Not his love for his daughter. That was the one fixed point around which everything else orbited. But something more personal than either of those things. Something to do with his own sense of himself. He was 51 years old. He had spent 23 years driving professionally, 12 with the Orlando Magic organization, 5 with Shaq, and the time in between and around those things filled with various contracts and assignments in the Orlando area. He was good at it. He had always been good at it. Driving was not merely a job for Marcus Webb in the way that some jobs are merely jobs. It was the expression of something, of the particular satisfaction that comes from doing a precise and useful thing with complete reliability over a long span of time. The satisfaction of being someone that the people around you could count on with their eyes closed. The months in Atlanta had taken him away from that, and while he did not regret a single day of it, would have done every day of it twice without hesitation, he had felt the absence of it the way you feel the absence of something load-bearing, something that was holding you up without your awareness of it, until it was gone. He contacted Patricia Goodson at the O'Neill Group in mid-July, not to return to work, just to check in, to let her know he was back in Orlando and doing well. Patricia, who was warm and practical in equal measure, said she was glad to hear it, and to take all the time he needed, and that his position remained available whenever he was ready. He drove for 2 other clients in July and August, smaller assignments, shorter hours, arranged through his professional network in the Orlando driving community. A corporate executive based near Lake Nona who needed airport transfers 3 days a week. A retired couple in Winter Park who required a driver for medical appointments and grocery runs on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Nothing that made great demands on him. Things that gave him back the rhythm of the work. The early mornings and the careful routes, and the quiet professionalism that was his natural register. He rebuilt himself, quietly, the way he did everything, without announcement or drama or audience. By September, he was ready. On the morning of September 9, 2019, a Monday, the kind of warm Orlando September morning that is indistinguishable from July except by calendar, Marcus Jerome Webb woke at 5:30 a.m. He made instant coffee. He stirred it 12 times. He put on a pressed gray shirt and dark slacks and his good shoes. He drove to Clyde's barber shop on Orange Blossom Trail and sat in the second chair and tipped $4. He stopped at the grocery store. He stocked the cooler, Gatorade fruit punch, wide-mouth bottles, red seedless grapes. He drove to the Isleworth estate in Windermere and pulled the black Escalade, which had been serviced and cleaned and sitting in the garage since February, into the driveway. He arrived at 7:43 in the morning. He turned the engine on. He set the cooler on the passenger seat. He turned the radio to the gospel station, low enough that it felt like something personal. He put his hands on the wheel, and he waited. Inside the house, Shaq was up. He had a TNT inside the NBA production commitment in Atlanta the following day. The NBA season was around the corner, the familiar machinery of the broadcast year beginning to spin up again, and he had a morning full of calls ahead. He was standing in the kitchen with coffee, scrolling through his phone, when Brianna Holloway sent a text that consisted of 3 words. Marcus is outside. Shaq put the coffee mug down on the counter. He did not respond to the text. He walked through the house to the front window. The same window where, on February 12th, he had stood looking at an empty driveway and felt something was wrong before he understood what it was. He looked out. The black Escalade was in the driveway, engine running, Marcus behind the wheel. Shaq stood at the window for a moment and looked at this. Then he did something he could not have explained fully if asked. He put his large hand flat against the glass of the window, just briefly, in the way you touch something when you want to acknowledge it without disturbing it. Then he dropped his hand and walked to the front door, and came outside into the September morning. The Florida heat met him at the door, the thick, certain, all-encompassing heat of a September that has not yet read the calendar. He walked down the front path toward the Escalade. The driveway was wide and long, and the morning light came across the Butler chain of lakes at an angle that turned everything gold at this hour. Shaq's shadow ran long across the pavement as he walked. He went to the driver's window. Marcus rolled it down. They looked at each other. There was a great deal in that look. 7 months of it. A February morning, and a small apartment, and a wooden kitchen chair, and 2 cups of coffee, stirred 12 times. Phone calls made from a parking lot window. A turkey sandwich in a hospital cafe. A bone marrow biopsy. A handmade sign in a patch of Georgia sunlight. A piece of notebook paper with 4 words in old-school cursive. All of it was in the look. Neither of them needed to name it. "She's good?" Shaq asked. "She's good," Marcus said. "Remission since June. Going back to nursing school in January." He paused. "She's going back to Grady for her clinicals. Dr. Osei said she'd be hearing about it." Shaq smiled. "The real one. She's going to be a great nurse," he said. "Yes, she is," Marcus said. "Because she already is one. She just needs the piece of paper to prove it." Shaq laughed. "The full one. The one that comes from somewhere lower than the chest and takes up whatever room it's in." It bounced off the driveway and the side of the house and rolled out toward the lake. Then he straightened up and put one hand on the roof of the Escalade and looked down at Marcus in the driver's seat. "You ready to drive?" he asked. Marcus allowed himself the small, full smile, the one that was not the television smile, or the polite smile, or the managing a situation smile. The real one, which was not large or showy, but was completely genuine, the way small, genuine things are always more trustworthy than large, performed ones. "I was born ready," Marcus said. "You just didn't know it." Shaq looked at him for one more second. Then he walked around to the rear passenger door and opened it and folded himself into the back seat with the practiced efficiency of a very large man who has spent decades navigating spaces built for someone else's dimensions. He settled in. He reached into the cooler. He found a wide-mouth Gatorade fruit punch. He looked at it for a moment. "You stocked the cooler," Shaq said. "I always stock the cooler," Marcus said. "I know," Shaq said. "That's what I mean." Marcus put the Escalade in reverse and backed out of the driveway with the smooth, unhurried competence that was entirely his own. He shifted into drive. He pulled out onto the road that curved through the Isleworth community, past the iron gates and the long lawns, and the houses sitting quiet in the morning light above the water. From the front, the gospel station came in clear and low. From the back, silence. But different silence now. The same silence as before in shape and texture. The familiar silence of two people who have been in this car together enough times that quiet between them requires no explanation or management. But fuller now. Heavier in the good way that things get heavy when they have been tested and held. The silence of a thing that has been through something real and come out the other side, changed but intact. Some silences are empty. This one was full. Full of everything that had happened between February and September. The months and the miles and the medical paperwork and the hospital corridors and the long nights and the turkey sandwiches and the phone calls and the note in the back seat and the 4 words and what the 4 words had done. Full of a father and a daughter. Full of an early morning in a parking lot on Clifton Road in Atlanta, when Marcus had prayed the same prayer for the 100th consecutive day, and then received an answer. Full of a 23-year-old woman holding a handmade sign in a patch of June sunlight, saying, "I am still here, and I am going back to Grady, and watch me." Full of everything that does not go on the highlight reel but is, when you sit quietly with it, the actual substance of a life. 3 weeks after Marcus came back, a package arrived at his apartment on West Conroy Road. No return address. Orlando postmark. Inside, a new James Patterson novel, the one he had mentioned to no one, that he had seen reviewed in a magazine at the barber shop and thought, privately, that he would like to read, and a Barnes & Noble gift card, and a post-it note in large, slightly unruly handwriting, for the next one, and the one after that, and all the ones after those. Marcus stood in his kitchen and held the note. He looked at the first post-it note, still tucked in the cracked spine of his pocket Bible between the pages of Psalms, the one from 2018 that said the same thing, minus the last line. He put the new one next to it. 2 post-it notes now, side by side in the Bible, between the same pages. He stood there for a while. Then he made himself a cup of instant coffee, kettle on the stove, single-serve Folgers packet, spoon drawn through it exactly 12 times. And he sat at his kitchen table in the morning, quiet of his small and honest life, and he looked at the wall where Destiny's graduation photograph hung in its dark wood frame, and he felt, for the first time in a long time, something he recognized but had been too close to for months to properly name. He felt like himself. Not the version of himself that had been running on fear and coffee and hospital chair sleep for 4 months in Atlanta. Not the version that had sat frozen in a black Escalade in a driveway in Isleworth with orange chicken going cold and 4 words he couldn't say out loud. The real version. The one that showed up early. The one that stocked the cooler. The one that knew about the grapes and the wide-mouth bottles and the 12 stirs and the gospel station turned low. The one that had raised a daughter alone since she was 11 years old, and had done it well enough that she had decided, at 14, to spend her life taking care of people the way she had been taken care of. He was back. Destiny Renee Webb returned to Georgia State University in January 2020, exactly as she had said she would. She completed her readmission paperwork in November 2019. She spoke with her academic advisor about the clinical hours she had already completed and those that remained. She spoke with the nursing program director, a woman named Dr. Constance Arma, who told her that her enrollment was fully protected, that her financial aid had been preserved, and that the program was glad to have her back. Destiny did not cry in that meeting. She had done her crying. She saved the dry eyes for the moments that deserved them. She moved back into her campus apartment on East Point in early January. She unpacked her suitcases. She put the navy blue head wrap in the top drawer of her dresser, not thrown away, not hidden, kept, as a reminder of something she had gone through and survived, which is a different relationship with a difficult object than most people allow themselves. She went to her first class on January 13, 2020. She sat in the third row. She had a new notebook, spiral-bound, blue cover. She uncapped her pen. The professor began to speak about pharmacological interventions in acute care settings, and Destiny wrote the date at the top of the first page, and then the title of the lecture, and then she began to take notes the way she always had. Thorough, organized, nothing wasted. She was a nursing student again. She was on her way back to Grady. Marcus called Shaq that evening. He did not text. He called, which was less usual for him, and which Shaq answered immediately because of it, the deviation from habit carrying its own signal. "She's back in school," Marcus said. "First day was today." A pause on the line. Shaq was somewhere loud. A restaurant, it sounded like, or a lobby somewhere, the ambient noise of a public space. But the next sound was a door closing, or a corner being turned, because the noise dropped and then it was quiet. "January 13th, Shaq said. "Yes, sir." "Almost exactly a year," Shaq said, "from when she called you." Marcus had not thought of it that way. He did the arithmetic now, sitting at his kitchen table. February 11th, 2019 to January 13th, 2020. 11 months. Not quite a year, but close enough that the nearness of it felt intentional, the way certain numbers feel when the universe has arranged them with more care than chance alone would suggest. "Almost," Marcus said. "She's going to finish," Shaq said. Not a question. "She's going to finish," Marcus said. A brief pause. Then Shaq said something he had not said before, in those words, in all the months of texts and calls and updates. He said it simply and without decoration, and it landed the way simple, true things land when they are said at exactly the right moment. "I'm proud of her, Marcus." Marcus sat with that for a moment. "I'll tell her," he said. "You tell her," Shaq said. And Marcus, "Yes, sir, I'm proud of you too." The kitchen was very quiet. The gospel station was off this evening. Marcus had forgotten to turn it on, which was rare enough to notice. The refrigerator hummed. The wind outside moved through the palm tree at the corner of the building, the dry rattle of its fronds familiar and constant. Marcus looked at Destiny's photograph on the wall. The graduation smile, the cap and gown, the whole sun-filled certainty of a young woman holding her future in both hands. He thought about Claudette, the way she always knew before he did when something was exactly right. The way she had laughed loudly enough for strangers to turn around. The way she had made a house feel, lived in with food that took all day, and music on a Saturday morning, and a sweet potato pie recipe now kept in a Ziploc bag, because the paper had become too fragile to hold. She would have liked this moment. She would have known exactly what it was worth. "Thank you," Marcus said into the phone. He heard Shaq make a sound. Not a laugh, not quite. Something warmer than either. "Don't thank me," Shaq said. "You did this." Marcus shook his head, even though no one could see it. "We did this," he said. A pause. "Yeah," Shaq said. "Okay, we did this." There is a question that has been sitting quietly underneath this entire story. It has been there since the first chapter. Patient, waiting. The way important questions wait when they know they will eventually be answered. You have felt it the way you feel something in your peripheral vision, always slightly outside the direct line of sight, but never entirely gone. The question is not, what did the note say? You know what the note says. You have known since chapter 3, when Marcus stood in his doorway and told Shaq there was a note in the back seat under the Panda Express bag, written in careful old-school cursive on a torn piece of yellow legal pad. 4 words. Sorry. Family emergency. Thank you. That has been established. That particular door has been open for several chapters now, and you have walked through it. The real question, the one the cliffhanger was actually guarding, the one that required the full length of this story to answer properly, is this. Why did those 4 words matter so much? Not to Marcus. His reasons for writing them are clear. The fog of crisis. The inability to make larger words come. The deep-seated courtesy of a man raised to acknowledge the people around him, even in the middle of his own devastation. But why did those 4 words matter so much to Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal? A man who had been thanked in every language, in every arena, in every format the modern world has invented for the expression of gratitude. That he sat down on the front steps of a multi-million-dollar home on a February morning and cried. That is the question this chapter answers. And the answer requires going back further than February 2019. It requires going back to a boy in Newark, New Jersey. Shaquille O'Neal was born on March 6, 1972, at Jersey City Medical Center in Jersey City, New Jersey. His mother, Lucille O'Neal, was 20 years old. His biological father, Joe Tony, was not present in the way that fathers are supposed to be present. Not consistently, not reliably, not in the way that builds the interior architecture of a child who grows up knowing they are wanted, without condition. Joe Tony and Shaquille O'Neal did not have a relationship. This is a documented and publicly acknowledged fact, one that Shaq has spoken about in interviews with the directness of a man who has processed the reality of it and chosen not to be defined by the wound, but who does not pretend the wound was not there. Philip Harrison was the man who raised him. Philip was an Army sergeant, disciplined, demanding, physically imposing in his own right, the kind of man who believed that standards existed for reasons, and that the reasons were not negotiable. He married Lucille when Shaquille was still young, and the family moved as military families move. Newark to Germany to Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. The geography of childhood shifting beneath Shaq's feet, with the regularity of orders received and orders followed. Philip was strict. This is also documented and publicly acknowledged. He pushed. He demanded. He did not offer praise easily or often, because he believed, as men of his generation and his training often believed, that the purpose of a father was to prepare a child for a world that would not offer leniency, and so neither would he. But he also loved, and he was there, consistently, reliably, without deviation, the one fixed point that does not move while everything else does. In the autobiography Shaq Uncut, published in 2011, O'Neal is clear and specific about what Philip Harrison meant to him. The man who gave him structure when structure was what he needed, who gave him accountability when accountability was what would save him, who gave him a version of love that looked like high standards and showed up every day regardless. What Philip Harrison also gave him, and this is the part that matters for this story, was an understanding of what it means to serve quietly and without recognition. Philip Harrison never became famous. He never sought attention. He did his job, as a soldier, as a husband, as a stepfather, with the same steady, uncelebrated competence that Marcus Webb would later bring to a black Escalade and an early morning driveway. He was not the kind of man who said thank you easily, or who expected to be thanked. But he was the kind of man who showed up, always, without exception. Shaq had watched this his whole childhood, and somewhere in the watching, he had developed a specific and finely tuned sensitivity to a particular kind of person. The quiet, reliable, uncelebrated kind. The kind that does not ask to be noticed. The kind that shows up early and leaves late, and stocks the cooler with the right Gatorade, and does not talk about any of it. The kind that the world tends to overlook, precisely because they never make themselves difficult to overlook. Marcus Webb was that kind of person. And when Marcus left 4 words on a piece of notebook paper, 4 words that included the phrase, "Thank you," even in the middle of the worst crisis of his life, even when he had every reason and right in the world to think only of himself, Shaq recognized something in those 4 words that went all the way back to Newark, New Jersey. He recognized his stepfather, not literally, not exactly, but in the essential quality of it, the quiet dignity, the service without complaint, the gratitude offered freely to others by someone who had never demanded it for themselves. That was why he sat down on the front steps and cried, not for Marcus, not for destiny, not even for the beauty of what had happened between them over 5 years of early mornings and red seedless grapes and gospel music turned low. He cried because 4 words on a torn piece of paper had reached through 30 years of accumulated distance and touched the boy in Newark, who had watched a quiet, uncelebrated man show up every day and had learned, from that watching, what reliability actually looked like and what it was actually worth. He cried because some lessons do not finish teaching themselves until exactly the right moment. And that morning, in the driveway in Isleworth, was that moment. He called Philip Harrison that afternoon. This is not something Shaq has discussed publicly. It is included here because it happened, and because the story is incomplete without it, and because the chain of consequence that began with Marcus Webb's note did not end in Shaq's driveway. He called his stepfather, and the call was not long, and it was not elaborate. It did not contain a formal declaration, or a tearful reunion, or any of the cinematic machinery that stories of this kind are sometimes furnished with. It was a phone call between a man who had built a remarkable life and the man who had helped build the foundation beneath it. He told Philip he had been thinking about him. He told him he had been reminded, recently, what it looked like when someone served without seeking recognition. He told him he understood now, more than he had before, what those years of showing up had actually cost, and what they had actually given. Philip Harrison listened to this. Then he said, in the measured, direct, economy of words manner of a man who spent a career in the United States Army, "You turned out all right." Coming from Philip Harrison, this was a standing ovation. Shaq carried it with him for a long time after. Now we come to the part of the story that takes place in the ordinary light of the years that followed. Not dramatic years, or not continuously dramatic anyway. Years with the normal texture of time, which is mostly regular and sometimes extraordinary, and occasionally both at once. Destiny Renee Webb completed her remaining clinical rotations at Grady Memorial Hospital on Jesse Hill Jr. Drive in Atlanta, beginning in January 2020. A fact made more complicated by what was about to descend on the world. By March 2020, COVID-19 had arrived in the United States with the kind of total, reorganizing force that redraws every map that existed before it. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Healthcare workers were working conditions that tested the outer limits of human endurance. Destiny Webb was in the middle of her clinical rotations when it hit. She did not leave. This requires a moment of acknowledgement, because it is not a small thing. She had just spent 6 months in a hospital as a patient, had been on the receiving end of exactly the kind of care that was now being stretched to its breaking point, and she had every legitimate reason, physical and psychological, to step back and protect herself. She did not step back. She stepped in. She worked the Grady Memorial Hospital floors during the spring of 2020 as a student nurse under the direction of her clinical supervisors, doing what nurses do in crisis, showing up, staying late, absorbing the work that needed absorbing, bringing the specific quality of presence to frightened patients that she had understood, at 14 years old in a hospital room in Winter Park, Florida, was the most important thing a nurse could offer. She was not afraid. Or rather, she was afraid, and she went anyway, which is the only form of courage that actually counts. Marcus found out what she was doing through a phone call in April 2020. He did not try to talk her out of it. He understood, in his bones, why she was there. He drove to Atlanta that weekend, the highways eerily empty in the way they were that spring, the world seeming to hold its breath, and brought her groceries and 2 weeks' worth of instant coffee packets and a new James Patterson novel, and sat with her for 2 days in her apartment before driving back to Orlando. He texted Shaq on the drive home. "She's working Grady during all this. Student nurse. Won't leave." Shaq's reply came within minutes. "Of course she won't. She's Marcus Webb's daughter." Destiny Renee Webb received her Bachelor of Science in Nursing from Georgia State University's Burdine F. Lewis College of Nursing and Health Professions on May 8, 2021. The ceremony was held outdoors on Georgia State's downtown Atlanta campus, a concession to the times. The academic regalia somewhat surreal under open sky. The rows of chairs spaced with the new geometry of a world that had learned caution. Marcus sat in the family section in a dark suit he had pressed the night before, his pocket Bible in his breast pocket, his good shoes on his feet. He watched his daughter walk across the stage. She was in the navy blue head wrap. Not the graduation cap. She wore the head wrap instead, which she had obtained permission to do, and which the university had granted without hesitation, understanding without needing it explained what the wrap represented and what wearing it to this particular ceremony meant. Her braids were long again now, the way they had been before the illness. She was not thin anymore. She stood at the full height of herself, 5'4", her father's quiet eyes, her mother's stubborn chin, and 9 years of absolute, undeviating intention, visible in the way she walked across that stage. She shook the dean's hand. She took her diploma. She turned to find her father in the crowd. He was on his feet. Not clapping, or not only clapping. He was standing with his hands pressed flat together in front of his face, the way people stand in prayer. But his eyes were open and looking directly at her, which was how Marcus Webb prayed, when the gratitude was too large for closed eyes and bowed head. She pressed her diploma to her chest and looked at him. He nodded once. Slowly, the nod that meant, yes, exactly. This is what I knew was coming. She nodded back. Everything else was noise. She texted Shaq from the courtyard after the ceremony. She had his number properly now, not the abbreviated contact label she had used before, but the full name, the way you save the number of someone who has become real to you. She sent the text with a photo attached, herself in the navy blue wrap, diploma in hand, standing in the Atlanta May sunshine with the smile that now knew everything it had cost. The message read, "Mr. O'Neill, I told you I would. Destiny Webb, BSN, headed to the oncology floor. For Gloria, for my mom, and for you." Shaq was in Los Angeles when the text arrived. A production meeting for the upcoming NBA Finals coverage on TNT, the familiar pre-playoff machinery of the broadcast year. He was in a conference room with scheduling whiteboards and catering and the organized noise of a television crew preparing for the sport's biggest stage. He looked at the photo. He showed it to no one this time. He put his phone face down on the table and sat with the photo inside himself for a moment. The way you sit with certain images when they are too good to immediately translate into words or actions. When they need a moment of simple, unmediated acknowledgement before the world comes back in. Then he picked the phone up and typed, "Destiny Webb BSN. Look at that. Your mama is so proud of you. So is Gloria. So am I. Now go take care of people the way you were born to. The oncology floor is lucky, and they don't even know it yet." He sent it. He put his phone away. He looked around the conference room, the whiteboards and the scheduling grids, and the faces of people preparing to broadcast basketball to millions, and he thought about a note on a piece of yellow legal pad. 4 words. He thought about where those 4 words had gone, what they had started. The chain of consequence running forward from that cold February morning. The phone calls made at a window overlooking a parking lot. The apartment on Clifton Road. The bone marrow biopsy results. The handmade sign. the return to nursing school, the Grady Hospital corridors in the spring of 2020, the diploma held against a chest, in a blue head wrap in Atlanta sunshine. All of it, from 4 words. Sorry. Family emergency. Thank you. Here is what this story is actually about. It is not about celebrity. It is not about wealth or fame, or the capacity of powerful people to solve problems that ordinary people cannot, though all of those things appear in it, because they are part of what happened, and leaving them out would be dishonest. It is about something older and simpler than any of that. It is about what gets built between people when they show up consistently over time without asking for recognition. It is about what becomes possible, quietly, without announcement, when 2 people in a car over 5 years of early mornings build something neither of them has officially named, but both of them have been tending with care. It is about Marcus Webb, who drove faithfully and stocked the cooler and waited 4 hours outside a theme park, and knew about the 12 stirs, and left a thank you note in the middle of the worst week of his life, because that was who he was, and nothing, not crisis, not grief, not the vertigo of a world gone suddenly wrong, was going to change who he was. It is about Destiny Webb, who decided at 14 what a good life looked like, and spent 9 years and 1 near-catastrophic interruption proving that the decision still held. It is about Gloria, the nurse with the reading glasses on the beaded chain, who squeezed a dying woman's hand every time she left the room, who never knew that a 14-year-old girl was watching, who will never know that the watching became a career, and the career became a life, and the life is right now unfolding on an oncology floor in Atlanta, Georgia, where a young woman with her father's quiet eyes and her mother's stubborn chin is going room to room doing exactly what Gloria did, squeezing hands, being present, making people feel less alone. And it is about Shaquille O'Neal, the 7'4" championship, platinum album, Hall of Fame, DJ Diesel, Emmy-winning, backboard-shattering, business empire-building icon, sitting in a wooden kitchen chair in a small apartment on West Conroy Road on a cold February morning, making coffee with exactly 12 stirs because a quiet man had taken care of him for 5 years and now needed to be taken care of in return. That is what the story is about. The rest is details. Marcus Webb retired in 2022. He drove for Shaq until the spring of that year. 3 more years after September 2019. 3 more years of early mornings and airport runs and gospel music turned low, and the accumulated quiet language of 2 people who have been in a car together long enough to communicate in something richer than words. The retirement was not dramatic. It was not preceded by a long notice period or a formal announcement. Marcus told Shaq in February of 2022, 8 years, almost to the month, from the spring of 2014, when he had said yes to Patricia Goodson before she finished explaining the job, that he thought it was time. He was 54. His knees had opinions about early mornings that they had not had before. Destiny was established in her career and no longer needed the particular shape of support that had driven so much of what he did. He had saved carefully and consistently, and the savings, augmented by the years of Shaq's continued payroll through the Atlanta months, and the generosity of various other arrangements he had never asked for and always received, were sufficient for a modest and comfortable retirement. He wanted, he said, to sleep past 6. Shaq threw him a dinner. Not a large one. Shaq had given Marcus ample opportunity to veto any arrangement that felt too big or too public, and Marcus had exercised this right firmly. A private room at Christner's Prime Steak and Lobster on Orange Avenue in Orlando, a restaurant that had been in the city since 1973, older than Shaq and Marcus both, with dark wood paneling and white tablecloths, and the kind of unhurried quiet that serious restaurants cultivate deliberately. 14 people. Shaq, Brianna Holloway, Patricia Goodson, several of the Magic-era colleagues Marcus had stayed close to over the years, and Destiny, who drove down from Atlanta for the occasion and sat beside her father at the table in a deep burgundy dress that was the exact color of the second head wrap she had bought at the beauty supply store on Memorial Drive during her treatment, which Marcus noticed and which he did not mention, but which meant everything to him. Shaq spoke. He did not prepare remarks. He stood up with a glass, and he spoke from the place where genuine things come from, which is not the prepared place, but the true one. He said, "There are people in your life that you count on so completely that you stop noticing you're counting on them, like gravity. You don't wake up every morning grateful for gravity. You just live in it. It holds you up, and you go about your day." He paused. Marcus Webb was gravity. For 8 years he was gravity. And I didn't know how much I needed gravity until one February morning it wasn't there. He paused again. He looked at Marcus, who was sitting with his hands flat on the white tablecloth and his jaw doing the quiet, tightening thing it did when he was holding something in. "He left me a note," Shaq said. 4 words. "I'm not going to tell you what it said." He smiled. "Some things belong to the people they happen to." He raised his glass. Marcus Jerome Webb, 8 years, every morning, not one complaint, not one late arrival, not one day where he was anything less than exactly who he said he was. He looked at Marcus directly. "You are the most reliable person I have ever met, and I have met a lot of people." The table raised their glasses. Marcus looked at the tablecloth. Destiny put her hand over his. He looked up at her. She had Claudette's smile, the one that came from somewhere deeper than happiness, the one that meant, "I see you. I know what this is. You don't have to explain it." "Speech," she said. Marcus shook his head. "Daddy." He shook his head again. Then he looked around the table. The faces, the candlelight, the white tablecloths, Shaq standing with his glass raised, Brianna Holloway smiling from across the table, Patricia Goodson, who had made a phone call 8 years ago that had set all of this in motion. He picked up his own glass. He stood. He was quiet for a moment. Then Marcus Webb, who had never in 54 years made things about himself, who had been raised to serve without complaint and give without expectation and arrive early and leave late, and stock the cooler, and know about the 12 stirs, and leave a thank you note on a piece of yellow legal pad, even when the world was falling apart, said the only 2 words that had ever been sufficient. "Thank you," he said. He sat back down. Destiny squeezed his hand. That was enough. That was everything. He still goes to Clyde's barber shop on Orange Blossom Trail every other Saturday. He still sits in the second chair. He still tips $4. He still drives the Honda Accord, a newer one now, a 2019, but the same model, the same color, the same quality of reliably unexceptional transportation that suits him. It does not click when the heat comes on. He is still adjusting to this. He still watches sunsets over Lake Tibet Butler from the parking lot near his apartment. The lake is the same. The light is the same. The hammered copper color is the same. Some things do not change, and the not changing of them is a particular comfort to a man who has been through the kind of change that leaves marks. He reads James Patterson. He still reads slowly because he has always read slowly, because Marcus Webb does everything at the pace that allows him to do it properly. The books arrive with regularity, a package every few months, no return address, Orlando postmark. He never asks who sends them. He already knows. He has a full bookshelf now. It has taken 8 years to build. He runs his hand along the spines sometimes and counts them. Not the titles, but the months, the mornings, the early starts and the late finishes, and the 4-hour waits, and the gospel music turned low, and the cooler stocked, and the 12 stirs, and all the ordinary, unremarkable, irreplaceable days that accumulated into this. Into a life, his life, which is, it turns out, more than enough. Destiny Renee Webb works the oncology floor. Every day she goes room to room. Every day she checks the charts, and adjusts the medications, and explains things in plain language that takes the fear out of them a little. Every day she sits at the edge of a bed when there is time. Not always, because hospital floors do not always have time, but when there is, and she just exists in the room with someone who is afraid and sick and needs to feel less alone. And every time she leaves a room, every single time, without fail, she squeezes the patient's hand. Not because she was taught to, not because it is in the protocol, because a woman named Gloria squeezed her mother's hand in a hospital room in Winter Park, Florida, in 2007, and a 14-year-old girl was watching and understood, in the way children understand things that go deeper than words, that this was what it looked like to do something right. She has never stopped doing it. She never will. The note is still in existence. It lives in a drawer in the Isleworth estate, not framed, not displayed, not turned into anything larger than what it is. A small square of paper, folded once, the fold now soft from being opened and refolded across the years. The cursive is still clear. The paper has yellowed slightly at the edges, the way paper does when it has been somewhere warm for a long time. 4 words. Sorry. Family emergency. Thank you. Shaq opens the drawer sometimes. He does not do it on a schedule. He does it when something has reminded him of what the words mean. A morning that required more from him than he felt prepared to give. A conversation that made him wonder whether the people around him knew what they were worth to him. A moment when the noise of his enormous life got loud enough that he needed to remember what quiet loyalty looked like up close. He opens the drawer. He looks at the paper. He does not unfold it every time. Sometimes just knowing it is there is enough. Some things do not need to be said again. They have already been said, in careful old-school cursive, in the best and most permanent way, simply and without enough words, and with everything meant. Thank you. 2 words that started a phone call, that started an apartment on Clifton Road, that started a bone marrow biopsy and a handmade sign, and a return to nursing school, and a diploma held against a chest in a blue head wrap, and an oncology floor in Atlanta where hands get squeezed every day. 2 words that started all of it, and the man who wrote them never knew. Not fully, not the whole chain of it, every link and consequence and room and hand squeezed and patient, made to feel less alone. He just wrote what he felt. In the middle of the worst week of his life. Because that was who Marcus Webb was. Because his mother had raised him that way in Ocala, Florida, and the raising had held. That is the whole story. That is all of it. Some people move through the world like weather. Loud, visible, impossible to ignore, reshaping the landscape wherever they go. Shaquille O'Neal is that kind of person, and has been since he was 19 years old, and the backboards started coming down. And some people move through the world like gravity, quiet, constant, invisible until they are gone, at which point you understand, with complete and sudden clarity, exactly how much of you they were holding up. Marcus Webb is that kind of person. The world needs both. It always has. It always will. And on the very best days, the days when the world is working the way it is supposed to work, the way it was always capable of working, if enough people chose to be who they actually were, the weather and the gravity find each other. They get in a car. They drive. And the silence between them is full of everything that does not need to be said, because it has already been lived. For all the Marcuses, for all the destinies, for all the Glorias, show up early, stock the cooler, squeeze the hand. It is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything. There is a photograph that does not exist on the internet. You cannot find it on Instagram or Twitter or TMZ or any of the entertainment news sites that make their living documenting every visible moment of Shaquille O'Neal's public life. It did not appear in People magazine or Sports Illustrated, or on the TNT broadcast desk, or in any of the hundreds of media profiles written about him Over 30 years of being one of the most recognizable human beings on the planet. It exists in one place only, on Marcus Webb's phone. He took it himself, on a Saturday afternoon in October 2022, 4 months after his retirement dinner at Christner's, on a day when Shaq happened to be in Orlando between commitments and called Marcus on a whim, the way people call each other when they have stopped needing a reason, and the calling itself is the reason. He asked Marcus if he wanted to come by. Marcus said yes before the question was finished, which was the Marcus Webb way. He drove to Isleworth in the 2019 Honda Accord, same model, same color, no clicking heater, and pulled up to the estate and parked in the driveway where the black Escalade used to sit on early mornings, where 5 years of arrivals had worn a kind of groove in the air, if not in the pavement. He got out. He walked to the front door. Shaq answered it himself. They sat on the back patio for 2 hours. The Butler chain of lakes was doing what it does on October afternoons in Florida, catching the light at the angle that makes the water look like it has been hammered from something more valuable than water. The sky above it going through its slow, deliberate progression from blue to gold to the deep copper rose that Marcus had been watching from the Lake Tibet Butler parking lot for 20 years. They talked about destiny. She had been on the oncology floor for over a year by then, and had recently been commended by her floor supervisor. A letter of formal recognition, which Destiny had texted to Marcus as a photograph of the actual letter, and which Marcus had printed out and added to the wall beside her graduation photo, framed in the same dark wood. They talked about the NBA season starting up. Charles Barkley had said something on a recent broadcast that Shaq disagreed with, which was not news. Shaq and Barkley disagreed about something on every broadcast, as a matter of professional habit and genuine friendship, the two of them having developed over years of inside the NBA desk time, the specific dynamic of people who argue constantly because they enjoy each other too much to be polite. They talked about Marcus's knees, which were doing better since he stopped getting in and out of the Escalade 12 times a day. They talked about Ocala, Marcus's mother, who had passed in 2018 at 81 years old, and who Marcus still thought about every day in the way you think about the person who taught you the most important things you know. Shaq listened to this the way he had listened to everything in that small apartment on West Conroy Road, completely, without filling the spaces with his own words before Marcus had finished with his. At one point, the light going gold across the lake, the distant sound of a neighbor's boat engine fading into the middle distance, there was a long silence. The comfortable kind. The kind that two people only share when they have earned it, across enough time and experience that silence no longer requires management. Marcus looked at the lake. He thought about something. Then he said, "Can I take a picture?" Shaq looked over at him. "Of what?" Marcus gestured. Not at the lake, not at the house, but at the two of them. At the patio chairs and the evening light, and the particular ordinariness of two men sitting together, at the end of an afternoon, with nothing particular being performed. Shaq looked at him for a moment. "You want a picture of us just sitting here?" he said. "Yes," Marcus said. Shaq thought about this. "Why?" Marcus considered the question with his usual unhurried honesty. "Because it's real," he said. "The other stuff, the games, the cameras, all that, that's real too. But this is real in a different way, and I want to remember it." Shaq was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "All right." Marcus took out his phone. He held it at arm's length. The photo captured the two of them from the side. Shaq enormous in his chair, Marcus smaller beside him, the lake behind them going gold. Neither of them looking at the camera because Marcus had pressed the button while they were both still looking at the water. It is, by any objective photographic standard, not a particularly good photograph. The framing is imperfect. Marcus's thumb is slightly visible in one corner. The light is nice, but the focus is soft. Neither man is posed or performing. It is, for exactly those reasons, the most honest photograph that has ever been taken of Shaquille O'Neal. Marcus looked at it on his screen. Good? Shaq asked. Good, Marcus said. He has never shown it to anyone. It lives in his phone, in an album he has labeled simply Real, which contains 17 photographs. Destiny at various ages, Claudette in a summer dress on a Daytona Beach trip from 1999, his mother outside the house in Ocala the last Christmas before she passed, and now this. Two men on a patio at the end of an afternoon with a lake behind them going the color of something precious. 17 photographs. Everything that matters. Now we step back. Further back than February 2019. Further back than 2014 when Marcus said yes before Patricia Goodson finished her sentence. Further back than any of the events this story has described. We step back to the altitude where the full shape of things becomes visible. The way you have to gain height to see how a river actually runs. Because from the ground, all you see is the bend directly in front of you. From this height, here is what the story of Marcus Webb and Shaquille O'Neal looks like. It looks like two men from completely different worlds. Different sizes, different incomes, different levels of public visibility, different everything that the world uses to sort people into categories, who found themselves in proximity to each other for 8 years and chose, each in their own way, to behave with integrity. That is all. That is also everything. Marcus chose to show up, every morning, without complaint or calculation. He chose to learn the preferences, the Gatorade and the grapes and the 12 stirs, and the gospel music turned low, not because it was required, but because paying attention to the people around you is how Marcus understood the job of being a person in the world. Shaq chose to notice. He chose, over 5 years of backseat mornings, to see the man in the front seat as a man, fully, completely, with a name and a daughter, and a history, and a worth that had nothing to do with what he was being paid. He chose, when the man disappeared, to go find him. He chose, when he found him, to sit in a wooden chair and make coffee with 12 stirs and listen before he spoke. These are not complicated choices. They are not rare in the sense of being beyond ordinary human capacity. But they are rare in the sense of being frequently unmade, in the sense of being the choices that people know they should make and find reasons not to, because making them requires a kind of attention and a kind of vulnerability and a kind of willingness to be inconvenienced by another person's reality that the modern world does not particularly reward and sometimes actively discourages. Marcus and Shaq made them anyway. And look what grew from that. There is a word in the Zulu language of South Africa, a language spoken by millions of people in the eastern part of the country, including in and around the city of Durban, that has traveled far from its origin and been used in many different contexts with many different degrees of accuracy, but whose original meaning remains one of the most precise and useful ideas available in any human language. The word is Ubuntu. It means, in its most direct translation, I am because we are. The longer version of the meaning, the one that requires more words to approximate properly in English, is something like this. A person is a person through other persons. We do not become fully ourselves in isolation. We become ourselves through the quality of our connections to others, through what we give and what we receive, through how we treat the people around us and how they treat us in return. Ubuntu. Marcus Webb had it. He did not know the word. He would not have used it to describe himself. But the quality it names, the understanding that your own humanity is bound up in how you honor the humanity of the people around you, regardless of their status or their size or their salary, was the central operating principle of Marcus Jerome Webb's life. And Shaquille O'Neal, who had traveled further from his origins than almost anyone in the history of American sports, who had accumulated every category of worldly success the culture offers and several it does not normally provide, recognized it, in a front seat, over 5 years, and when it mattered, he returned it. That is Ubuntu. That is what this story is actually about. Let us talk, briefly and honestly, about what this story is not. It is not a story about a rich man saving a poor man, though the economic reality of what Shaq provided to Marcus and Destiny was real and significant, and the story would be dishonest to minimize it. Money matters. Access to good medicine matters. The ability to pay for an apartment near a cancer treatment center matters in ways that are life and death literal, and pretending otherwise would be a comfortable lie. But the money was not the gift. The money was the tool. The gift was something that costs nothing and is infinitely harder to give than money, which is why it is rarer than money, even among people who have unlimited amounts of it. The gift was attention. Shaq paid attention to Marcus for 5 years. He noticed the man. He noticed the daughter. He noticed the 12 stirs. He noticed when the man was gone, and he did not delegate the noticing to someone else. He got in a rented Ford Explorer on a cold February morning and went himself, alone, without a camera or an assistant or a narrative he was constructing for public consumption. He just went, because he had been paying attention, and paying attention creates obligation, the good kind. The kind that does not feel like obligation at all, but simply like the obvious next thing to do when someone you have been paying attention to needs you. This is available to every person reading this story. Not the Escalade or the Winship Cancer Institute or the furnished apartment on Clifton Road. Those are specific to circumstances most people do not have. But the attention, the noticing, the choice to see the person in front of you, the driver, the nurse, the checkout clerk, the colleague who has been quiet for 3 days, the neighbor whose car has not moved in a week, as a full human being, with a full human life that extends far beyond the function they are serving in your immediate experience. That is available to everyone. It costs nothing. It can start a chain of consequence that goes further than you will ever know. Gloria never knew. This deserves its own paragraph because it is important, and because it is the kind of thing that gets lost in stories that focus on the people who can be named and found and quoted. The nurse with the reading glasses on the beaded chain, who worked the oncology unit at Florida Hospital, now Advent Health Orlando, on Rollins Street in Winter Park in 2007, who squeezed Claudette Webb's hand every time she left the room. That woman went home at the end of her shift, the way nurses go home at the end of their shifts, which is tired, and sometimes sad, and sometimes both, and always carrying more than the people around them fully understand. She did not know that a 14-year-old girl was watching. She did not know that the watching became a decision, and the decision became 9 years of nursing school, and the 9 years became a pandemic spring in a Grady Hospital corridor, and a bone marrow biopsy waded through, and a diploma held in a blue head wrap, and an oncology floor in Atlanta, Georgia, where hands get squeezed every day. She did not know that she started all of it. She was just doing her job. She was just being who she was. That is the most staggering thing this story contains, and it is the thing that requires the most stillness to properly absorb. You do not know who is watching. You do not know which of your ordinary moments, the ones you will not remember, the ones that feel like nothing, the ones that are just the quiet expression of who you are when no one important is looking, are being witnessed by someone for whom that moment will become everything. Gloria squeezed a hand. An oncology floor in Atlanta is now full of people who feel less alone because of it. She does not know. She will never know. She did it anyway, not because she knew, but because it was right, and because she was the kind of person who did right things when no one important was watching, which is the only kind of person worth being. We said at the beginning of this story that before it ended, you would find out why Marcus Webb walked away without saying goodbye. You know now. We said you would find out what Shaq found in the back seat of the Escalade. You know that too. We said you would understand why one of the most powerful men in sports sat alone in his driveway and cried. You understand it. But there is one more thing we did not promise at the beginning, because it could not be promised at the beginning. It could only be earned. The way certain understandings can only be earned, through the full length of a story told honestly and without shortcuts. Here it is. The reason this story matters is not because of what Shaq did for Marcus and Destiny, though what he did was real and significant and good. The reason it matters is not because of what Marcus did for Shaq over 5 years of quiet loyalty, though what he did was also real and significant and good. The reason this story matters is because of what it proves about the nature of ordinary life. Ordinary life, the early mornings and the long drives and the instant coffee stirred 12 times, and the gospel music turned low and the hand squeezed at the door, is not the backdrop against which important things happen. It is the important thing. It is always and only the important thing. The championships and the platinum records and the Emmy Awards and the Hall of Fame plaques, those are the evidence that extraordinary things are possible. They are the proof of capacity. They are real, and they are worth celebrating, and Shaquille O'Neal earned every one of them with his body and his mind and his will and years of work that most people will never fully appreciate. But they are not what made him cry on the front steps on a February morning. What made him cry was a man who showed up, who paid attention, who said thank you when he didn't have to, when he was in the middle of the worst week of his life, when no one would have blamed him for thinking only of himself. A man who was, in the simplest and most complete sense of the phrase, a good person. That is what Shaquille O'Neal has. In addition to 4 championship rings, and a Hall of Fame plaque, and a platinum rap album, and an Emmy, and an international DJ career, and a business empire, and one of the most recognizable faces on earth. He has a piece of notebook paper in a drawer, 4 words in careful cursive. He keeps it because it reminds him of something that all of it, the rings, the records, the money, the fame, the decades of public achievement, cannot tell him on its own. It reminds him that being genuinely good to the people around you, in the small and daily and unremarkable ways, is not a consolation prize for people who cannot achieve great things. It is the greatest thing. It has always been the greatest thing. It will always be the greatest thing. And a quiet man, in a gray sweatshirt, on a blue couch, in a small apartment on West Conroy Road, in Orlando, Florida, on a cold February morning in 2019, proved it. With 4 words. With a thank you note left under a bag of cold orange chicken. With a life lived exactly as his mother taught him to live it. In Ocala. With no audience and no recognition, and no expectation of either. Show up. Pay attention. Say thank you. That is the whole curriculum. Everything else follows. The last time Marcus Webb and Shaquille O'Neal saw each other in person was a Tuesday in March 2024. Shaq was in Orlando for a personal matter. Nothing public. Nothing that made the news. The kind of quiet, private visit that his life still contained, despite the apparatus of celebrity surrounding everything else. He called Marcus from the road. Marcus was home. He came over. They sat in Marcus's apartment on West Conroy Road. The same apartment. The same blue couch. The same wooden chair where Shaq had sat in February 2019 and made coffee with 12 stirs. The same photograph of Destiny on the wall. Except beside it now, in the same dark wood frame, the letter of commendation from Grady Memorial Hospital, and a newer photograph. Destiny in scrubs, on the oncology floor, her natural hair pulled back, laughing at something someone off-camera has said, the laugh coming out of her the way Claudette's laugh used to come out of her, loud enough for strangers to turn around and smile without knowing why. Shaq looked at the new photograph for a long time. "She looks like her mother," he said. "Yes, she does," Marcus said. "More every year." They drank coffee, instant, stirred 12 times. The gospel station was on, low, finding its signal between songs with the soft static fuzz of AM radio doing its best. They talked about nothing that would make a highlight reel. They talked about Marcus's knees, still better, about Destiny's floor, busy, always busy, The oncology floor is never not busy. About a James Patterson novel Marcus had finished last week and thought was the best one in a while. About the NBA season and whether a certain team's defense was as good as the analysts were saying, which they agreed it was not. About the Butler chain of lakes, and whether the water level had been higher this year than last. It had, according to Marcus, who paid attention to these things the way he paid attention to everything, quietly and over time. At one point, Shaq looked around the apartment. Same couch, same table with the plastic tablecloth, same television on the pressed wood stand, same wind chimes somewhere above them on the second-floor landing, turning in whatever moved through the afternoon air. "You ever think about moving?" Shaq asked. "Getting somewhere bigger?" Marcus considered this with his usual unhurried honesty. "No," he said. "Why not?" Marcus looked around his apartment, the space he had lived in for over 20 years, that had held his grief and his hope, and his early mornings and his late nights, and his daughter's childhood visits, and his wife's memory, and 2 post-it notes in a Bible, and a photograph that smiled like the sun. "Everything I need is here," Marcus said. Shaq nodded. He understood this completely. They finished their coffee. Shaq stood to leave. He had somewhere to be. There was always somewhere to be. The machinery of his life did not stop for Tuesday afternoons in Orlando, even when Tuesday afternoons in Orlando were exactly where he wanted to be. At the door, Marcus said, "Tell me you'll call." "I'll call," Shaq said. "Not Brianna. You." Shaq looked at him. "Me," he confirmed. Marcus nodded. He opened the door. The afternoon came in. Warm Florida March. The palm tree at the corner of the building doing its perpetual slow negotiation with the breeze. The sound of children somewhere in the complex, doing what children do in parking lots on warm afternoons. Shaq stepped through the door. He stopped. He turned back. He looked at Marcus standing in the doorway of his small and honest apartment in his gray sweatshirt, and his good shoes, and his salt and pepper hair freshly trimmed. Because it was a Saturday equivalent, this. A day when Marcus made himself presentable, because an occasion deserved it. And he said something he had not said before in those exact words, though it had been true for a long time. "You're my friend, Marcus," he said. "Not you were a great driver. Not I appreciate everything you did. Not any of the language that keeps a comfortable distance between the person speaking and the full weight of what they mean. You're my friend." Marcus stood in the doorway. His jaw did the thing it did. He pressed his lips together. Then he said, "I know." 2 words. "The right ones." Shaq walked down the stairs. He crossed the parking lot. He got into the car that was waiting for him. A newer Escalade. Different driver. A young man named Corey who had been with the O'Neill Group for 2 years and was very good at his job and would, in time, develop his own relationship with the particular rhythms of driving for Shaquille O'Neal. Corey pulled out of the parking lot. Marcus watched from the doorway until the car turned onto West Conroy Road and was gone. Then he went inside. He made coffee. Kettle on the stove. Single-serve Folgers packet. Spoon drawn through it 12 times. He sat at the kitchen table. He looked at the photograph on the wall. Destiny laughing on the oncology floor. Claudette's laugh coming out of her mouth into the future. He picked up his phone. He called Destiny. She answered on the second ring, the way she always answered when it was her father. "Hey, Daddy." "Hey, baby," he said. "How's the floor?" "Busy," she said. "Always busy." "You eating?" "Daddy, are you eating?" A pause. Then, "Yes." "Good," he said. "That's good." They talked for 20 minutes. About the floor, and a patient who had made her laugh, and a colleague who had made her think, and the sweet potato pie she was planning to make on the weekend. Claudette's recipe. From the handwritten card in the Ziploc bag in the cookbook drawer. The paper now so fragile, it barely holds itself together, but still legible, still exactly right, still tasting like a house that is lived in and loved. After they hung up, Marcus sat for a while in the kitchen quiet. The gospel station played. The afternoon light came through the window at the angle that turned the kitchen table the color of warm wood. The wind chimes went outside, soft and constant, the sound of ordinary time moving through ordinary air. Marcus Webb sat in the middle of his life, his full, real, earned, sufficient, irreplaceable life, and felt, with the steady certainty of a man who has been through enough to know the difference between something that matters and something that doesn't, that everything was exactly as it should be. Not perfect, not large, not loud, just exactly as it should be, which is, it turns out, the best that life gets. And it is more than enough. It is everything. A final note on what is real. This story is a work of narrative nonfiction told as dramatic fiction. Shaquille O'Neal is a real person, and all facts about his career, life, and public record, the 1992 NBA Draft, the Orlando Magic, the Los Angeles Lakers, the 3 consecutive championships from 2000 to 2002, the Miami Heat title in 2006, the Hall of Fame induction in 2016, TNT's Inside the NBA, DJ Diesel, the Shaquille O'Neal Foundation, are accurate and verifiable. Marcus Webb, Destiny Webb, Claudette Webb, Brianna Holloway, Terrell Fontaine, Dr. Adrian Caldwell, Dr. Miriam Osei, Vanessa Okafor, Patricia Goodson, Dr. Constance Arma, and Gloria are fictional characters created for this story. Their circumstances and qualities are constructed to illuminate real truths about loyalty, service, gratitude, and the relationships that form between people across different stations in life. All locations referenced: Isleworth, in Windermere, Florida; Advent Health Orlando, on Rollins Street; Winship Cancer Institute at Emory University, on Clifton Road; Georgia State University's Burdine F. Lewis College; Grady Memorial Hospital on Jesse Hill Jr. Drive; Clyde's Barbershop on Orange Blossom Trail; Christner's Prime Steak and Lobster on Orange Avenue, are real places, accurately described. Philip Harrison, Shaq's stepfather, is a real person. His role in Shaq's life is publicly documented. The phone call described in this chapter is fictional, constructed in the spirit of what their relationship has been described as across Shaq's public statements. The word Ubuntu and its meaning are real. Gloria is fictional. The truth she represents is not. And that is the story of Marcus Webb, Destiny, and Shaquille O'Neal. A quiet man, a sick daughter, 4 words on a piece of notebook paper, and proof that the most powerful thing a person can do has nothing to do with how famous they are or how much money they have. It has everything to do with whether they notice the people around them, whether they show up, whether they say thank you even when the world is falling apart. That is it. That is the whole lesson. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city, your country, your corner of the world in the comments below. We read every single one. And we love seeing just how far kindness travels. If this story moved you, if it made you think about someone in your life who shows up quietly and never asks for anything, hit that like button right now. Not for us, for Marcus. For every Marcus out there who deserves to be seen. And if you believe that stories like this one matter, stories about real loyalty, real love, and real human decency, then subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell. Because we find these stories every single week, and we bring them straight to you. Stories that remind you what people are actually capable of when they choose to be good. Spread this one. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. You never know whose Marcus Webb moment this might be. And right now, click the video appearing on your screen. Because the next story is waiting, and we promise you, it is worth every second. We will see you there.